I want to kind of go through the times that, if you're here for any of the following items, we will be having public comment during these items, so you can wait to give your public comment. Item number 3, which is an action on public hearing for the Phil Smith annexation, there will be public comment during that time. Item number 4, the public hearing ordinance for the general plan amendment for the Parkway detail, there will be a public hearing that will be held there. I will be moving after item number 4 on the agenda. I'm going to be moving up item number 9, which is discussion of the potential fence replacement along Alpine Highway. We will be allowing comment during that discussion. So you do not, if you're here for that item, you do not need to come up during the public hearing. You'll be able to do that during that. If you're here for any other agenda items or any other items before the City Council, I'd recommend we do it for the unscheduled public appearances that you come up and before the City Council. At this time, we'll be beginning with an invocation by Councilmember Tim Ball, followed by a pledge of allegiance by Councilmember Scott Smith.
Father in heaven, we are grateful to meet together as a City Council, city staff, and our fellow citizens. We ask that Thou might bless us with Thy Spirit, so there will be no contention or ill feelings, that we may make decisions based upon the best interests of the citizens of Highland. We also ask that Thou may pour Thy blessings out upon those in the world that are in midst of a conflict, that conflict may be concluded very soon, and that there may be peace restored to that region of the world. This we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand to honor the flag in our country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to excuse at this time Councilmember Kim Riddell, who is traveling with her family out of the country, so she will not be able to join us tonight. As I mentioned once again, if you're here for any of the following items, there will be public comment during that time of those items. Item number 3, 4, and 9. At this time, we'll have an unscheduled public appearances for those who would like to come up on any other item that might be on the agenda or any other item you'd like to discuss with the council. So this time we'll open that, and you'll keep your comments to less than 3 minutes, please. Is there anyone like to come and discuss anything with the council? Please come up and state your name. And notice there will be a clock up on the little thing that will tell you how long you have.
John Redmond, 9847 North, 6130 West. Just a comment on the road study. My general comment is I'm not pleased. We've already been trying to raise issues for over a year, and now we're talking about a year or 2 before anything can be done. They said that the number 2 concerns for that study was safety and environmental impact. At no point did I see anything to do on the environment, especially noise pollution. I would ask that noise pollution be explicitly added to part of that study. The key issue seems to be what's a collector and what's not. The problem is the canal and 10400 were not original collectors. People bought homes, and now all of a sudden they're major collectors. And that seems to be the issue. We have been asking for reduced speed limit. We've been asking for stop signs. We've been asking for drainage ditches versus raised tablets. And out of hand, because it's an arterial, all those things are off the table. Okay, that's very concerning. I know there's concern about emergencies, but those are emergencies. We have to live with the speed and the noise every day, every minute. And there has to be some compromise. I would ask that they explicitly add drainage depressions to the active devices to slow traffic. There are several examples of those in Lehigh. One just slightly east of Lehigh on that first road north of Costco. One of the concerns I have is that one of the grading issues was 10 miles per hour over. Well, that might be okay on SR 92, where the speed limit is 50 and you go 60, but we're talking about home residences that are within 20 feet of the road, and we're asking for 25. 10 miles an hour is a big change. I'd like to see 5 miles an hour be included in that. And then just one last comment to kind of emphasize this issue. I went over and analyzed that last speed accident on that section between Alpine Highway and 6,000. You guys have a copy. Based on little physics understanding, you can calculate that that person was going over 73 miles an hour when she exited the road and drove up on somebody's property for 300 feet. Took out 5 trees and was in the property for about 3 seconds. So, thank you.
Anyone else like to come up and address the council during public comment? Seeing that, we'll go ahead and we'll now close the unscheduled public comments and move on to item number 2, which is a consent item for approval of meeting minutes from April 18, 2023.
Mayor, I'll make a motion. I move that the Highland City Council approve the meeting minutes from April 18th, 2023.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Sarah. Any further discussion before voting? Seeing none, let's go ahead and let's vote on that. Sorry, you might have been logged in early, and they might have restarted it. So would you go ahead, Sarah, would you go ahead and give us a roll vote?
Yes.
Okay, then go ahead and reveal. That passes 4-0. We'll now move on to item number 3, which is an action and a public hearing for the Phyllis-Smith annexation. We'll have our city planner, Kelly, go through that.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Okay, you should be familiar with this. Before, on December 6th, the applicant actually came to the council for a communication item to explain what they were hoping to do as far as an annexation and the agreement that they would like to come to between the city and the applicant. At the time, with their initial request, council members expressed some differing opinions, but overall we're open to having them continue on with at least the annexation application, and then said that they wanted to have more information before making a final decision on what public improvements the council would require. On March 21st, the council adopted the resolution of intent, where it's basically the council intending to consider annexing. It doesn't tie the council down to approve or deny the annexation, but as part of that adoption of the resolution, the council added as part of their motion to only require 20 feet of asphalt, and then still require all the curb, gutter, sidewalk improvements, and all the other requirements by code. This is the vicinity map, just a little reminder as to where it is. This is 9600 North right here. And then just to the west, this is the Lehigh City boundary. And then to the east, we have Highland. This parcel's in Highland, this parcel's in Highland, so is this one, and this is the only right here that's unincorporated. As far as staff recommendation, like the mayor mentioned, this will require a public hearing. This decision to annex and the decisions associated with which public improvements to require are all legislative. The council has full discretion on whether or not to require certain improvements. Because the council initially expressed wanting to waive at least allowing the 20 feet of asphalt rather than the typical 27 feet of asphalt, it did have to go to planning commission because it's different than our typical development code requirements. And so as part of our recommendation, we do recommend that you consider the planning commission's recommendation as well, and I'll go a little further into detail in a moment. So, like I said, resolution of intent was adopted by the council March 21st. On May 23rd, the planning commission did review this application. And then now, as far as the process goes, it's coming back to the council for y'all to hold a public hearing and then either approve or deny the annexation. And as part of this annexation, because there are different public improvement requirements, it does require an annexation agreement, and that's where we establish what the zoning is and what we're requiring in order for them to be annexed. So the applicant, the parcel is 1.13 acres. The applicant is Phyllis Smith. Sean Athey is the one that is representing Phyllis Smith. This request is for it to be zoned R120. And there's also a city-owned parcel that is on the east side, and I'll show that in a moment as well, that the applicant is requesting to be used as their road frontage for this back parcel. In the R120 zone, they would be able to subdivide it into 2 lots, and they're wanting to use that existing private drive as their access to that back lot. As part of that, they would have to bring down all the utilities to that second lot for that to be serviced through our city services. And they are requesting to keep, there's an existing about 11 feet of asphalt on that city parcel. They're requesting to keep that as it is. As far as, so Highland City has an annexation policy plan that goes through all of our unincorporated areas around the city and what, at the time of adoption, what the plan was for those to be zoned in Highland City. And the plan in the annexation policy plan was for it to be zoned R120. It is south of 9600 North, everything in Highland that is south of 9600 North is zoned R120. So it is consistent with our current zoning. In order to subdivide, the property does have enough square footage, but as I mentioned, they are requesting to use that city-owned parcel because they do not have enough frontage on 96 in order to meet our R120 requirements. Now I'm going to kind of go through the terms of the annexation agreement. I'm going to try to make them as simplified as possible, as they are kind of complicated. Yes, Councilmember Smith.
So the city-owned parcel was always designed by the common council to be access to property farther south, right? So wasn't it always supposed to be a road, as far as we know?
As far as we know, it is currently not dedicated as right-of-way. It's just a city-owned parcel with a private lane, as it was termed in the minutes from 1988. But it's meant to act as a private lane to the property owner to the south.
Provide access for the property farther south.
Correct.
So you would think, if you look at that, that it's meant to be a road. Maybe.
With it ended up, yeah. Originally, that parcel was owned by the property owner to the south, but as part of that property to the south being annexed into the city, it was a condition that that parcel be dedicated to the city so that eventually it became a road.
So it become access, okay.
Correct. Okay, as far as, or it's kind of divided into 2 sections of requirements. One, just the requirements for the existing home as is, and then the next part of the agreement is if they were to subdivide, these would be the requirements we would hold them to. And so right now, for this parcel to annex, as far as utility requirements for the existing home, because they're not connected to our city utilities, are currently on a well. Essentially, if the applicant decides to connect to our city culinary system, we would also stipulate that they have to connect to PI. We don't want them using culinary water for any pressurized irrigation on the lot. However, we did add if they want to connect to PI without connecting to culinary, we would be fine with that. Because that would just mean they would continue to use their well for their culinary water. And then as part of that, they would have to bear all the costs for the extension, connection of utilities, and any associated fees. Now, if they were to subdivide it into those 2 lots like I mentioned, as far as culinary water, they don't have to dedicate any culinary shares because it was actually in that original boundary of the Highland Water Company. But as far as like the water line being extended down, they would have to pay all costs and impact fees for that, and meter fees. For the pressurized irrigation, they would have to dedicate water shares for that, and also connect both lots to PI. For sewer, they'd be required to connect both lots to city sewer, that's a development code requirement, and would again need to pay all applicable impact fees, both our city sewer and TSSD. And then storm drain storm drain, all those improvements would be based on the percolation rates, which we would get to that point when we do our civil review for the subdivision itself. Now going on to 9600 North. As far as for the subdivision, they would have to dedicate the appropriate right-of-way. At 9600 North is a 66-foot right-of-way in our transportation plan. And so they would have to meet the minimum dedication for that and then complete all curb gutter sidewalk improvements and additional asphalt as needed. There's also an existing vacant Lehigh irrigation box in there on the west side of the property that they would have to, it has been abandoned by Lehigh irrigation, but it hasn't been filled, so it's just this empty box, so they'd have to remove it and fill it as part of those 9600 improvements. As part of this, staff is also proposing, because it is a condition of subdividing that they improve 96, but we are proposing to also make it a condition of annexation if they do not subdivide within 4 years. 96 is an important road for Highland City, and a lot of it is unfinished, and we want to make sure that we get the portions finished that we can. And so that's the condition that that we've outlined in the agreement as well. For the Highland City parcel, we would require half-street improvements plus 10 feet of asphalt as the original staff recommendation. Like I mentioned before, the city council, both the city council and the planning commission were willing to allow 20 feet of asphalt to meet the fire code minimums around that are full 27 feet. And then they would also have to dedicate a small portion of their parcel to meet our full 56-foot right-of-way width. The current parcel is only 54.5. But we're also proposing that just be dedicated south of the home, as the location of the home is already fairly close to that side property line. When this went to the planning commission, they did vote 6-0 to recommend approval. Again, following the original opinion by city council to allow for that 20 feet of asphalt. But they also stipulated that a concept plan be added as an exhibit to the agreement to reference to in the future, so we could kind of have an idea of what we're expecting, because it took a while to kind of piece it all together. And so this is the concept plan that we've had our engineering department draw up, and is showing this is the curb, sidewalk, park strip, and then curb and gutter is the red right here. If you can see a little bit right here, that's where it jogs to getting that additional 1.5 foot of right-of-way dedication. And then it just goes through basic requirements on 86 and then requirements on the city parcel. And then this is a motion to approve as is, if the council wants to approve the annexation agreement as is, and then here's an alternative motion if y'all want to make any changes. And then the applicant is also present and would like to share with the council as well.
This might be a question for the applicant, if he wants to.
I'd like to, if there's other questions, we'll invite the applicant to please come forward, if they'd like to come. Would the applicant like to come up?
So my question is, some of the things we discussed here, that because you have a well, you don't have to hook up the culinary, but we're going to require you to hook up the pressurized irrigation. How do you irrigate this lot now? What are you hooked up to? Do you do it from your well, or because it sounds like the Lehigh ditch is from abandoned?
Can you answer that, Phyllis? The ditch is abandoned. How are you irrigating your lawn right now?
So just make sure you state your name and that's what you raise in the record.
Oh, Phyllis Smith.
Welcome.
So the question is how are you watering all of your lawn? Are you doing that off your well, or do you have an irrigation ditch that you're able to access?
I have a well.
So you're doing pressure, or you're doing irrigation from the well as well as culinary?
Yeah, the well, the irrigation's been abandoned.
Yes.
So you're using the well to water your grass?
So I use the well to water my grass.
Okay. Because the requirement here was that you took up to the pressurized irrigation in Island, which is basically a good thing, but I just wondered how you're irrigating right now. No, I was just curious.
You say, I don't have your names in.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to address? Just maybe for the record, state your name and everything, and if there's anything you'd like to address to the council.
Yes, I would, thank you. My name is Randy Rimmelsbacher. I am a developer, but by trade, but I do not represent Phyllis as a developer tonight. I am her son-in-law. I'm just trying to help her out. So I think in the last city council meeting, when you made your resolution for intent, one question that came up a few times was precedence. And you turned several times to your attorney and asked about that. And I think that was a very appropriate question because you had concerns about setting a precedence if you approved what we were proposing. And the concern we have is that some precedence we believe has already been set in the past that should not be ignored. So the home directly to the east is Miss Worrelton. And when she annexed in, she was not required to make any improvements at all along 9600 North or along this private lane. Her home actually faces west, so her side yard technically is 9600 North. And her frontage facing this private lane, she's made no improvements. And furthermore, Mr. Minor, who is the home down at the end of the private lane to the south, when he annexed, he was not required to make any improvements, anything up on 9600 North or up the private lane. And I understand that there are valid arguments against what I'm saying, against precedence. My question is, does precedence have an expiration date? Some might argue yes. I think there's valid arguments on both sides, and that's where we're hoping that we can come to some kind of a compromise and maybe a negotiation. One thing that I think is very, very relevant that I'd like to talk about for a minute is the distribution of burden. Here in the United States, we tax rich people at a higher rate than we do poor people. And an argument could easily be made that that's not fair. That argument is often made. But society has obviously accepted that it's fair to tax wealthier people at a higher rate because they have other advantages. The rationale for a wealth tax is to reverse the trend of rising inequality. Wealth taxes are meant to move society in the opposite direction, that of promoting equality. The Institution on Taxation and Economic Policy published a comprehensive report assessing tax fairness by measuring effective state and local tax rates paid by all income groups. They found that federal taxes are progressive, but state and local taxes are commonly regressive, where effective tax rates are highest for the poor and lowest for the rich. Some of the main findings of this report include, quote, the vast majority of state and local tax systems are inequitable and upside down, taking a much greater share of income from low and middle income families than from wealthy families. Tax structures in 45 of the 50 states, it was found, exacerbate income inequality. Most state and local tax systems worsen income inequality by making incomes more unequal after collecting state and local taxes. Now, admittedly, while this issue of our application is not per se a tax, it effectively can be considered that. And the principle is the same. So who typically applies for a minor subdivision in your city? Your city has a provision in the code for a minor subdivision. Who typically applies for those in your city? I'm willing to bet it's not the wealthy landowners and major developers. Minor subdivisions are typically submitted and applied for by very small landowners and some of the lowest income people in your city. This 1 acre of land that we're applying for represents all of the land in this world that my mother-in-law owns. And your current code is putting a much greater burden on her and people like her, the people with the least amount of money in your community, and it reduces the burden for the wealthiest people in your community. Now, some cities are conscientious of this. It's actually fairly common that cities have a minor subdivision provision that requires less or no improvements. But Highland City does not. My understanding of the code, as I've read through it, is the improvement requirements are the same for a minor subdivision as they are for a major subdivision. For example, a few years ago, I owned a 1 acre lot with a home on it in Harriman City, and I wanted to subdivide that. It was on a corner of 2 collector roads, and they allowed me to subdivide it and not put in any improvements to split that lot in half. I was able to build one home. Lehigh City has a minor subdivision provision in their development code that gives a significant reduction in improvement requirements if you're creating a 2-lot subdivision and if the one existing home is a minimum of 5 years old. So exactly the criteria that we're meeting here. So in my opinion, there's a problem with the Highland City Code. Because there is no reduction for improvement requirements for minor subdivisions, resulting in an unfair burden for some small landowners. Now, I don't think this is intentional, certainly, probably a result of unintended consequences. But the result is that your code is penalizing the poorest in your community and rewarding the wealthiest with the greatest profit margins. And I believe there is no better case study than our application here today. As I mentioned before, I'm a developer, and the average cost per lot for a major subdivision, recently for our company, for a comparable development with comparable lot sizes, with no extraordinary site conditions or topography conditions, or anything like that, the average cost to improve a lot is approximately $75,000 for a half-acre lot. That's not the land, that's just the improvement costs. With our application here, if we make all of the improvements as per the Highland City Code, our estimated cost is $308,490 for one additional lot. That is more than 4 times more burden for my mother-in-law than for somebody, a big landowner or a big developer coming in doing a major subdivision. Is that really the intent of your code? Is this really what you want to do to the members of your community and city who own small parcels of land? I refer back to the statement from the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy. The vast majority of state and local tax systems are inequitable and upside down, taking a much greater share of income from low and middle income families than from wealthy families. If you'll recall, this council recommended a reduction from the 27 feet to the 20. And while we appreciate that, the reduction resulted in approximately $9,776 in improvements, leaving still a burden of $298,714 to improve this one additional lot. Still, approximately 4 times more burden. And there's not that much profit in development. If she's forced to make all of these recommended improvements, it's possible that she could subdivide her land, build a second home, and end up with less equity than she now has if she does nothing. And we're just trying to help her out, help her retire. So, I have two proposals. One, I think the city of Highland should consider changing your code permanently and take into consideration and evaluate if this is really the intended consequences, if you really truly want to put this burden on small landowners. And two, for our application here, we request that you waive the requirements for improvements along 9600 North and the surface improvements and storm drain for this, what we'll call the private lane for now. If you waive all of those things, we would still be putting in the underground utilities up the private lane for the sewer, the culinary water, and pressurized irrigation. There's engineering costs and other things associated with that. This would still result in an estimated cost of $137,055 to improve this lot. Even if we just do the bare bones minimum, we have to do that. Even if you said we don't have to do anything, we would still have to put in a water line and a sewer line just to have the home function. We're still, because we don't have any economies of scale, and that's a reality, that we're going to be more than $75,000 for one lot. But we're still looking at, with this bare minimum proposal, of $137,000 in costs. So, that's my request. And I can stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of that?
I have some questions. Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking at this. This is very helpful. I appreciate it. So, I'm curious because I kind of keep going back to this. So she has a well. Doesn't necessarily need to hook to culinary water, although it makes sense. But that's an expense of $32,000 that you could maybe not have. I guess I can understand not wanting to do all the asphalt and payments on the stub road because someday someone else is going to develop the property probably to the south, although it's been hanging there for 40 years, who knows. And so I assume that at that point you'd be willing to do your portion of the payment, different things, because it wouldn't be fair to them to have to do it all. Is that what I understand? Am I understanding that? So if that's developed and that road's fully developed on the stub road, would you be willing to pay 50% for your portion, or how does that work? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that we have a high burden and we're trying to get it as reasonable as possible, and the burden I think is already too high for one lot.
And I understand that, but at some point it may be developed and the stub road needs to be finished, and I would think that the people below would want you to pay half the asphalt and stuff at that time.
I think maybe the question, if you talk to the neighbors to the south and ask if they share in this with you, or this cost, I think that's.
At this time, no, he's not willing to. If we were to, if we were
agreement in place with the south owner, I understand, and they were willing to participate this time or entering an agreement to do that.
If we were to withdraw our application and never annex, and he subdivides his 4.5 acres back there, he will have 100% of the burden to improve that private lane. If we put in some of the underground utilities, we will transfer from 100% of his burden, a portion of that to us, and he would still have the remainder of it. So he's getting a benefit by us even just putting in the undergrounds. I think that's reasonable, and like I've already shown, we have a very high burden already.
So I guess, again, when we go back to culinary water, she has it actively working well.
It works perfectly fine.
She prefers to be on culinary water?
I wouldn't say that. I think we feel like my understanding is it was a requirement to switch to culinary.
Kelly, they keep the current home on the culinary well, but the new home has to use city water, correct?
Correct, as in all they would have to do is show that their well is approved by the state and that it's a legit well, and then we wouldn't have a culinary water
For the
permit,
current
which is
home,
standard.
not the new lot. The new
Correct, the new lot would have to connect to PI and culinary.
Okay, that was confusing in the presentation, I thought.
Even if the well is adequate for it, could we not?
we like, this is once again a city code. We have any new home that comes in has to hook up to our culinary well, or our culinary, our pressurized irrigation, and our sewer. You know, if there's some homes that aren't hooked up to our city sewer, there's been here, some that have wells, but if they come in and subdivide and add a new lot, our code requires that. Am I correct in stating that, Kelly?
Is technically, if the well was approved by the state to be able to be used for that second lot, like it had the capacity to, we like, got this right, maybe, in our code.
So that's a question I guess we'd have to answer.
It seems to me why put the burden on there if we have a perfectly good well that provides the water necessary. I think that's
In our
reasonable, but
development code, it's 100% a requirement to have to do sewer and PI, but culinary is kind of a,
That wasn't.
our proposal, technically, what I've proposed here tonight, does include us putting in the culinary, the PI, and the sewer, just nothing else. Again, we're willing to compromise and negotiate. We're
Council, any
open.
other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Since this is a public hearing, at this time I'll open this item up. If there are any public comment, public hearing is open. Does anyone like to come up and comment?
Hi, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Doug Courtney. I fully empathize with and understand the gentleman's points earlier. It does seem to be a high burden to bear. I believe that his solution is the wrong solution. What he is ultimately asking is, yes, Highland has identified and established this code, and now we would like you to ignore it. And that is not the right answer. The first of his two suggestions may be reasonable. Perhaps we should update the code. And if we update the code, then they could certainly come back under an updated code. In the meantime, that street is required in order to have the frontage to be able to subdivide this lot. And so my opinion is that it needs to be a real street. And the only reasonable way of accomplishing that at this point is for the applicant to provide those upgrades and improvements that are talked about. I think that's critical and necessary. So thank you all very much.
Anyone else like to come up and address this item as public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council for discussion. Any items for discussion?
I have a question to throw out there. What's to keep a developer from taking advantage of this change and buying up lots of, let's say, 1 acre, and in that way circumventing city codes?
What you're saying is, let's assume there was modification within what to require improvements in, what would be stop the developer from going, let's say, some other areas of Highland where they see this and trying to apply the same way, hey, I want to build the same way.
Because the gentleman made a good point, and that is fiscal policy or economic policy changes and affects behavior. So if I'm a rich developer, I'll say, ooh, that's really cool. I'm going to go in and buy 100 1-acre lots or 100 half-acre lots. I'm going to be able to circumvent all of these regulations, and I'm going to be able to make an additional $200,000 per location. So then, how do we define someone who is a, quote, rich developer and someone who isn't a rich developer? And then are we going to circumvent an accepted economic policy of economies of scale and say that you work toward efficiency by having larger volumes? And then are we going to get involved in social justice and say that capitalism should guarantee results and outcome? No, capitalism provides opportunity. You can't guarantee outcome, otherwise you have a different form of government. Although I do completely empathize with your points. It's a tough thing because I want her to be able to accomplish what she wants to do and have a meaningful retirement, but there is a reason for city statutes at the same time. And original question is, how do we keep, quote, rich developers, and then how do we define who they are to keep them out of this kind of deal?
That I think is just a philosophical, you want the developer to try to answer that.
I do, yes, let's get into philosophical thing. Not really, but I mean, those are some of my points.
I think the answer is you're going to make way less money doing it the way you said. You'll lose money. If I do a large development, it's going to cost me $75,000 per lot. This one lot's going to cost me $137,000. You're asking how can we prevent
But
land?
as we approach build out, there's only going to be smaller parcels of land.
So Tim, and then maybe economically, we can't always, that this lot, that what you're saying is that a developer, say it's only, they can come by this home and they can see this lot, and on your numbers, which, you know, I'm not sure, you know, if another developer or someone could get lower or higher, but even if they did that, let's assume this sold for 500, 550, that's still a viable business option for someone to do because they're still profitable. That's what you're saying is that free market would state to have someone do that.
By your definition, economic policy is going to shape behavior, and that will change the behavior of a large developer into purchasing multiple smaller lots to take advantage of this loophole. Although you did say that there would need to be an existing structure in place for 5 years, which could.
That's what the Lehigh's code currently says.
Yeah.
And if it was a huge problem, I don't think other cities would do this. It is an industry standard to some extent. I don't think all cities do it, but it's not uncommon.
Anyway, other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, the applicant, I do. So I'm kind of struggling with this because I try to side with the little guy, because I understand the expense here for Phyllis. And as you know from the last meeting, there are different things. But I guess what I'm struggling with is if we require you to put the curb, the sidewalk, 20 feet of road and different things, yes, that's an additional expense. You're talking of over $150,000. But I would think those things would also increase the value of the properties. Is that not right? I mean, if you had curb gutter and
It will
sidewalk,
to an
everything
extent,
on
but-
High Street, it would increase the value.
It will to an extent, but not that much. Not 300, not $300,000 worth. No,
But
no, not when the
137, so we're talking about another 150 or something, right?
yes, the difference from what we're proposing to what you had put in your intent resolution is another 150,000. We would not see a penny of that, I don't think, when we went to sell it, because everybody else is improving them for 75,000 on average. And again, we would be quadruple that.
Applicant? Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Is there other discussion items council would like to discuss, or are they prepared for a motion? You know, one of the things, this is a little hard, because you do see that one property owner is a resident of Highland that's been here long term, is trying to do something. It's hard, you know, in our code, the reason this is requiring, for me, where I looked at how it has to be approved, this is the access they're getting to their second lot. And this isn't frontage along one thing, they're having to, this is the benefit. There's no requirement for them to come in and do this. This is an applicant that's making application, and it's a business decision that they feel it's profitable for them to do. And the reason why they have to make that improvement on that side is that is where they have the frontage at to make it buildable lot. That's how I look at it. This is, now that the council sees different, we can put that in the motion. I was kind of chiming on that. We're not forcing them to do anything. This is them coming in. And the reason why they're able to do this is because they're counting the frontage along that side. So that's kind of.
No, I agree with you, Mayor, that they're not being required to do this. It's a choice that they're making. I guess where I'm at right now is we need to follow what our code is, and if our code is something that we need to look at and change in the future, then maybe we need to look at that and change in the future. But right now, this application has to be considered under the current code and the current rules that we have. So I would be ready to make a motion unless anybody else has a comment.
Can I ask just a question on the motion? Kelly, you brought up the planning commission made a recommendation to have a concept plan. Is that going to be part of the motion? Is that part of the if the motion as is that?
We added that into the annexation agreement that's in the staff report, so you wouldn't have to change it at all.
Okay, I just wanted to, go ahead. I just want to make sure the motion knew what was in.
Rob is raising his hand, I've never seen that before.
Maybe it's practice for a different city. Just a clarification of the process. Whatever you approve in terms of the agreement, we will then take that back with the applicant, assuming they are on board with that. If they don't are on board with that, they won't sign it. If they are, they'll sign it. We'll bring back a final ordinance that confirms the annexation that incorporates that agreement. So that would be the next step if that is approved. Basically, you're going to say, this is the final approval of, you approve the annexation on the terms set forth in the agreement or whatever the terms you agree on. And we work with the applicant to get that signed and recorded, and we'll bring back a final ordinance to wrap it up and actually change the boundaries of Highland. Just clarifying the process.
You ready for motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the city council approve the proposed annexation and annexation agreement requiring all standard public improvements and fees, but allow for the 20 feet of asphalt.
I have a motion by Brittany,
I'll second.
second by Sarah. Is there any other discussion you have before it goes to vote? Okay, let's go ahead and move to vote. Sarah, are you voting?
I thought it was, but I don't know.
Well, go ahead.
That's not,
So it's still not working, so Sarah, I'll come back to you for your vocal vote.
yes.
That was a yes, correct? Okay. This passes 3-1. We will now move on to item number 4, which is another public hearing and the ordinance of the general plan amendment to the parkway detail. And that is going to be also held.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Okay. On April 18th, we had a communication item at that city council meeting relating to, we talked a little bit about some storm drainage amendment that we had to make to code that was already passed, but also mentioned that we had to update our parkway detail to match that storm drainage amendment. So that's what this general plan amendment is coming to you today. And then, sorry, on the 16th was that amendment that I just referred to regarding the storm drainage, where essentially in the code, this is what it says verbatim, but fencing or walls associated with the parkway detail or other fencing directly adjacent to public property along public rights-of-way shall be set such that drainage flows at a minimum of 2% slope from the base of the fence perpendicularly to the curb and gutter on the adjacent public right-of-way. So that was in the amendment council already adopted, and it's just showing that this amendment is consistent with that. As far as our staff recommendation, it says planning commission, we recommend the city council hold a public hearing and accept the findings and approve the proposed general plan amendment. Here I'm showing on the left side our current parkway detail. This has not been updated since 2008. And there are several things that we, in practice, do differently. And so part of this, well, the general plan amendment is to update our full parkway detail. We had to change several regulations in there to be more consistent with what we as staff and also what the council has understood as far as what we've been trying to do with our parkway detail. An example of that is encouraging more xeriscape landscaping, or technically this parkway detail that we currently have in the general plan requires sod. And so going through the primary changes that we made, one is that xeriscaping is required. In our development code definition for xeriscaping, it does still require 25% plant coverage. And then it removes the planter requirement. So if you can see here in this old one, there's like this xeriscaped landscaped portion right here that was required at entries into subdivisions. Because we're making that shift to the entire parkway detail being xeriscaped, it didn't make sense to have a separate planter area. And then it's removing the 2-foot tall berms. This helps us, makes it a little easier as far as maintenance goes. sidewalk elevation, making sure that we have at least a 6-foot thin wall from all the sidewalk elevation along the parkway detail. And then we also added a cross section right here in the corner that clarifies that it does have to have a 2% slope going from where the fence is down to the curb to make sure we don't have any drainage from our city side going onto any private property on the other side of the fence. And we also added the site triangle to be consistent with our typical fencing requirements where we have, it's a 40 by 40 right triangle where you're not allowed to have any objects taller than 3 feet. And then as far as sprinkler requirements, it used to go into detail for specific heads that we had to have, but now that we're doing xeriscaping, it's a drip system. We've left in the general plan it being very general, and then when we have the actual engineering detail adopted, we'll have those specific drip line system requirements in there. And then we also added our typical setback details for fencing to be consistent with section 3612 of our development code to make sure that there was no discrepancies there. We did send out the appropriate public hearing notices for both the planning commission meeting and the city council meeting. For the planning commission meeting, we did receive one comment relating to the site triangle, which ended up being addressed at the planning commission meeting. The planning commission held their public hearing, and then the commissioners discussed a little bit about the fact that this would be required for new development, and then they also voted 6-0 to recommend approval to the council. Overall, these were our findings. It's consistent with the current practices of our engineering and public works departments. It conforms to the state law requirements regarding drainage, making sure we keep our own drainage on our own property. And then, like I mentioned, the slope and fencing requirements are now consistent with what the council has since adopted regarding fencing and storm drainage. And then the change to requiring xeriscaping supports what we've heard from the city council, trying to get us to be more water-wise in our own landscaping. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that y'all may have. And this also has to have a public hearing.
This is to refresh my memory as well as for the public that are here. So these parkways we're talking about are along your arterials, the collectors, they're not residential streets, obviously, because you have a park strip there that we're encouraging the xeriscape.
Right.
And so I was trying to think where this would apply. I mean, Ridgeview still putting in there on North County, which I assume could be all xeriscape now, which I think they were doing some anyway.
Which at the time, yeah, they kind of did this sod and xeriscaping because it wasn't technically a requirement at the time.
But now, while they're putting it in now in the new section from Canal Boulevard North, we're going to require that that's all xeriscape then?
Well,
Or they already got the plans?
because now is when we're updating our parkway detail, the accommodation they came to was, okay, at least provide as much xeriscaping as you'll.
So they're doing a
Let us
mix?
Yes,
Okay.
they're doing a mix.
So I'm trying to figure out where else this would apply. In the
So-
center of the city, if the Bueller is annexed to the city, I guess along 10400.
10400 requires it, correct?
Okay.
Along Alpine Highway, all requires it, so we have some undeveloped parcels. Aberlour had to have it, and we have Lost Landing that's coming in that has it. Say that
You're talking
again?
about the Longhorn property, that's already got a parkway detail.
Not, what about 6,000 West, does it have to have one?
No, 6,000 is not parkway detail, sorry. And in our general plan, it goes through each corridor where it's required, which is Alpine Highway, North County Boulevard, 10400. Canal, well, no, sorry, Canal Boulevard's not parkway detail.
Yes and no.
It makes it look like it because the fence is required to be 14 feet from top of curb.
Right. How about Highland Boulevard? Yeah.
Highland Boulevard, yes.
Okay. So any new thing that's in Highland, we're going to require the Highland intersection to do this?
Yeah, so you're talking on the Highland Boulevard going up Suncrest.
Yes.
In our agreement with Lehigh, you know, we have an agreement, they're having, because that road is facing Highland, they have to do a parkway detail, so we put that in the agreement.
And so are they grandfathered in between whatever they want right now, or are they going to have to do this?
Oh, yeah, that'd be a question, what would Lehigh have to do there? It was in our agreement, I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure the agreement was not specific. I think it just said they put in the parkway detail. Now, they had come up with a plan to say, we're gonna build this now, they might have grandfathered, but
Now, this is not the IC, the ER court.
Oh, they are, oh,
Yes.
yeah.
But whenever they come in, they're gonna comply with whatever our current standard is, which if we adopt this, will be that one.
So this seems like it mainly applies to 10
And a little bit, go up into Alpine.
And, yeah, north of, like on Alpine Highway going north,
north.
a lot of the east side is
We'll have some
completed.
on, what about this 40?
4,800.
And so if it was other,
Um,
the CNAPs probably would have to have some.
Okay. Is there,
Oh,
There'll be
sorry.
some small
I think it's
redevelopments
just-
or lot splits that result in a new parcel or something coming in that would, we can say, match this going forward. We can kind of feel it out on a case-by-case basis more than one.
so the
I
next
have to
question.
double check, I think the parkway details only required on North County Boulevard where it's the state arterial, I believe, once you get north of Alpine Highway, it's not.
We did the one section of their asset.
You're talking about,
What's up?
Stony Brook.
Yeah, Stony Brook has
Down
it.
the road.
If they have it, then I could be very wrong.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to clarify that.
Okay,
So
so
the
yes,
next question I asked,
I just
Mr.
wanted-
Kelly, it just kind of, some of this stuff came to me, but if we decide to redo our parkways, and then we're now obligated to zero-scape, right? If we make improvements to one of the existing one, or is this just brand new things that we're doing?
No, yeah, if we were to like completely change the landscaping plan, obviously we can maintain our existing
Correct.
parkway details as is, but if we were to tear it out and re-landscape, yes, we would have to,
So if
meet
you-
these
So
regulations.
here's the question, if you put in that park, the park maintenance building there at our community center, would you require to put that in here? I think that's what,
Right.
you hear that, Andy? Or Kelly, I guess Kelly or Rob, is that what we're saying, if you do something there, is it existing there, so you don't need to do that, or would we have to put that in if you do something there, the park maintenance building?
I would think that disturbance to the actual frontage will only be for a portion of that, and so I think we would probably try to do something that's consistent with the look of the rest of the landscape. I mean, I think that what you'd see there is probably a combination of some xeriscape and some grass, because the existing is made of grass, right? And so, you know, for us, as we look at the various city spots that we redo and things, we will you know, try to implement xeriscape where we can, because we want to be an example. But we also want to have it be, you know, the appearance and, you know, something that's consistent with everything else that's there. So I think that's really got to make a good example.
I'll make a motion for the council to
I think we need to hold up the hearing.
So this time we'll allow, on this item number 4, public hearing, which is an changing of an ordinance for the general plan amendment for parkway detail. This time public hearing is open. Does anyone like to come up and address this item? So now we close it, we bring it back to the council.
I'd like to make a motion if there's no other discussion. So I move that the Highland City Council approve the proposed amendment to the transportation element of the general plan to require that it be xeriscape and also update the parkway detail regulations relating to drainage, fence heights, and setbacks as previously discussed.
I'll second
Okay, motion by Scott, second by Tim. If there's no further discussion, we'll move to vote. We'll just wait for them all to post.
Mine doesn't come up here. Okay.
Okay, Sarah?
Yes.
That passes 4-0. Well, now moving on to item number 9, which is a discussion item only. It's a potential fence replacement along Alpine Highway. And Andy Spencer, our city engineer and public works, will also take that.
So, Mayor Council, you recall that April 18th, the City Council requested that staff gather a bid and come back and have a follow-up discussion relative to what the cost may be if you look at a replacement. The direction was given at that time is look at a replacement, something that would be permanent in nature. Permanent in nature was identified as the precast concrete fence. So similar to what's at Ridgeview fence. We then solicited a bid from a contractor who would do the complete package, and that bid came in from Strong Solutions. They are a contractor that's familiar with this work. They've done projects that are similar, and so what the work involves is first you have to go in and you have to demolish the existing fence. During all of this demolition, et cetera, you would have traffic control, and you'd have permits and traffic control along the road because you'd be coming and going from different various locations. You go in and install the new fence. You would then tie the residents' fences to that new fence because you'd have to kind of, the process of demolishing the old fence, you'd probably do a couple of feet damage on the residents' fence. And then you'd have to come back and replace or repair, depending on how bad the damage was, the landscape on the city side, because in order to do the demolition, the contractor would be running tractors back and forth up and down the corridor, right, along these various locations where the fences exist. And so to do that complete work minus any of the repair to the residents' homes, we didn't have the contractor bid the actual landscape repair to the various residential landscapes because the residential landscapes are so wide and very tough for him to give us a number in this sense without doing just a really thorough investigation. The bid for the replacement for the 4,600 feet is 4,571 to be exact, but is $1.87 million. We generally, when we look at the budget project, we try to set aside the 10% contingency so that we can, deal with the unforeseens. So project budget would be $1.2 million. If you do the 10% on top of this, it comes in just under $1.2 million. So that's, the range that we're looking at for a complete fence replacement on that corridor. And certainly, there's discussion that can be had on all sides of it. We're happy to look at additional options or whatever you'd like to look at. But as we understood the task at hand, this is what we're asked to do, is get this data to then start a discussion. So that's what Ray's here.
Thank you. Maybe it helps when the public are here. When we see the number of the 1.1, I know all on how the heck did we get to be almost $250 per square foot? Some of it is, unfortunately, the way that we function as a government. Meaning, in order to do this, if you were a resident, you'd probably just call up a guy. He wouldn't have to do a full engineering. He'd have to come get a city permit. You'd be able to pay him 50% down. You could contract with who it might be. They don't have to put a bond up or anything that way. City-wise, we're going to do a full engineering of what's going to happen here. We'll know every tree and where they're going to enter. They'll take down the fence. We will have a full bid that will go out for competitive wise, so that's why we have to have engineering drawings to make sure it's competitive and make sure it's fair. We will not be able to front them any money at all, so we can't get 50% down. They have to complete the entire job, and they have to be fully approved before they can get paid. Oh, and by the way, they have to be a large enough company they can put up a bond while do that. By doing that, we eliminate probably a good 90% of the companies that might be. And just, if you're wondering how we get to this point, because I have been so frustrated with the government aspect of how do we get around this, what do we do? And this is one of our frustrations we deal with the way the government has been set up with things. So we recognize that others might be able to get it less expensive. But Andy, I'm sure there's some questions for the council, but I want to also open it up to we have several residents for here with.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Did we get any other bids, or is this just?
We just listed one bid so that we could kind of get on the map, if you will, for discussion. Mayor's right that if we were to actually take this to a project and this became a project, we would competitively bid this. But we did go to a contractor that a member of our staff had knowledge of and done a project with before that was very similar, and said, these guys have done this project for me, and they will give us a bid, and we can talk to them and say, look, this is initially just for a discussion item, but we need a good bid, something that's reliable, something that you would build this for. say that, you know, hey, we're gonna go out to competitive bid, and we're gonna save 15%, I mean, that's wonderful, but even then, it still uses a frame of reference. If you save 15% on this, you're still in $1 million range, right? And so it's unlikely that if we're to place this project out to bid as a city, that this is gonna come in at $400,000 or something, you know, significantly less. Our bids may be a little less when we competitively bid it, but it'll be near this.
But this bid basically takes the whole fence down, including all the brick.
Yeah, you would have to, with installing a precast concrete fence, you would have to completely remove all the pillars, you'd completely remove everything to do with the existing fence. Because those existing pillars wouldn't work for the concrete fence. So, that, you know, and if you choose to go other fencing directions, you certainly might be able to reuse them. Say if you chose to keep the pillars and replace it, you know, I'm not saying what you shouldn't do, I'm just talking about an idea, you know, if you replace it with, say, a Trex fence, replace the wood portion with a Trex fence, well, then you could reuse the pillars. But if you're gonna go with the concrete pillars have the little slots that hold up the weight of the fence, the columns are designed to hold that weight. The whole system's designed to work together, right? And so if you're gonna go clear to the concrete fence, this is probably the extreme end of the expenditures. You're gonna spend something similar to this amount.
So if they talked about a Trex fence, why would you just threw that out? We'd have to amend our code or make.
You'd have to amend the code. That's why I say there's a lot of things there. I'm just trying to give an example where you could reuse the pillars. You know, something that wasn't relying on those pillars for the strength any more than the wood fence was. Where the concrete fence is so heavy that we would need to put in the columns or pillars that are designed to hold it.
I have a couple of questions. So just to explain some of these, I didn't quite understand what mobilization is.
Mobilization is what all of our contractors charge us for mobilization. Some contracts, it's also referred to as general conditions, but mobilization covers all of their overhead. It covers any of the fees to get the equipment to and from the site. And like I said, the term general conditions is actually a little more descriptive of it in that it's all the miscellaneous stuff that it takes to run a project, if you will. It would include in this case, like I said, bringing the equipment to and from. It would include their, you know, their permits, their office staff fees, all of their kind of, if you will, elements of the construction that go into running the project that don't necessarily equate to so many feet of a fence, if you will.
So precast sound wall installation, that should be materials and installation.
That's materials and installation.
Okay, and then is that 125 per linear foot for a certain height? What's the height?
That's 6 foot, sorry. We had them bid so they said that they felt like it mattered what precast fence they were bidding. Because we didn't have it selected, we just said, hey, bid it as if you're putting in the same fence that's in this view.
So 6 feet, and what's the width? And is it a hollow core or is it solid?
This would be the solid concrete fence, you know, not, this might, my understanding is they bid the solid concrete fence.
Okay, because I know that
there is a hollow
competitor
core
that has a foam, and that has been, I've seen it in places, it's been kind of a disaster. I won't mention the brand, just because people can punch through it, you can see the foam. So
my understanding is this was the solid core concrete fence.
okay, so it's the standard
concrete fence.
So it's 6 feet tall.
6 feet tall.
4,570, basically a mile of linear footage.
Almost.
A little bit less.
Yeah, almost a mile.
And then, okay, I understand that. Repair of existing loose street replacement, repair of existing building. Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, and like I said, unfortunately, we start thinking through the whole project. It's not, you know, just putting up that new fence. There's expenses associated with the whole process that you're done, right? From all the way from taking it down to fixing landscape. And so it turns into a much bigger.
One quick
residents would like to come up and address the council on this, and just ask that you state your name. Please keep it to 3 minutes. Also, as you come up, and just help us understand what some of your thoughts are.
I'm Nathan Woodbury. Thank you, Mayor Osler and City Council. I really appreciate the effort you put towards serving our city. Seeing the discussions that we've had so far, it's a lot of work and it's exhausting watching you guys work through that. So I just have some additional numbers with the quotes. I appreciate that quote because from our perspective, we don't see, you know, the demolition or the control of the roads and the traffic, the landscaping. The quote that I got from the company called Olympus Precast for a 6-foot, they actually quoted a little bit longer, 4,922 linear feet. Their budget for a 6-foot was 429,000. At 8-foot would be 612. I would love to have 8-foot, but that's just my own personal preference, and I feel like if we were to do that, I'd be willing to pay the extra for my section to have 8-foot. But I'm not here to talk about. There's definitely personal reasons why I would love to have precast concrete fence in there. That's why we redid our yard. There is one other personal note. When Steve Hogan and we went in together, we're neighbors, and we were redoing the fencing around our yard, and we got a quote together because as you know, going in together, we could get a better price. And also, if we would have done that section of fence, which we did not because we were told we could not, the price for my section of fence would have been $14,846. But now, if I were to do that, it would be $17,307, which is a difference of $2,460, which I would have to pay now, just simply because the city said I could not back then. But an even bigger issue for me, I'm looking at it as it's a main artery for Highland. I look at it as, you know, we've got the parkways that you've talked about. I mean, that's one of those areas where it's just a beautiful centerpiece for our city. And, you know, these fences have two sides. You know, I can control what's on my side, and maybe I'll, you know, put up something else. But the other side, it's seen by everybody. It's enjoyed by everybody. You know, I'm pro trails. I love that you guys are developing trails. I'm pro parks, city beautification, and I'm very pro theme walls. I love having theme walls, and the burden being put on us as a community of trying to get together and say, okay, we're all going to make the same change together is kind of an impossible task. We've gotten together as a community and we've discussed things, and we've discussed, you know, are we as residents willing to chip in? And there's many that are. There's many residents that are, but there's also residents that say, you know what, I don't have the means, or I actually rent, and I don't think my landlord would be willing to do that. So that's the part of discussion that's difficult. I just love the idea of a theme wall. Thank you.
I'm glad to see you back.
My name is Mike Martin. I'm Angry Guy from the 18th of April.
Welcome, Angry Guy.
I was going to get a shirt with that. Anyway. I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to be able to hear us, the concerns that we have. As I was thinking through the matter, I was thinking about Canal Boulevard and how we as parents, when we get new children, you know, new children need attention. And when the little baby screams, we take care of that baby right away. Whether they're sleeping or pooping, whatever it is, we want to take care of them. And I think that's kind of what's happened here with Canal Boulevard. We got that in there, and in 2 years, in the 2 or 3 meetings that I've seen with the city, you guys have authorized an additional, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. You were writing it. You're going to vote on another item tonight with that for a stoplight to go in, and that continues to get attention. The concern that I have as an old timer, I've lived here for 26 years. We've paid our taxes for a very, very long time into the city. The new residents that are impacted by that road and feed into that road haven't contributed as much. And it seems like we have an argument between the residents who've lived here for a while who want to have updates and upgrades done, and we kind of seem to get pushed to the back of the bus, if you will. The attention seems to be on the new stuff rather than the old stuff. I think that needs to be addressed. There's been, you know, finger pointing about who owns the fence. I think we've discussed that. You know, you could go on and on about that, but I think it's a problem. Somebody somewhere said, hey, we, the city, own the fence, and nobody ever corrected it until now. You know, Nathan applied for the permit, and they said, you know, a year ago, and they said, no, the city owns it. Then all of a sudden, people go to work and they go and find a note from 1995 stating that the homeowners own it, and here we are 28 years later, and it, you know, suddenly it needs to be, you know, taken care of. And I think whether it was obviously it was another city council that took care of that, but I think it's your due diligence to correct that. I also got a bid. I could talk about the financial impacts. I could look at, you know, 15 years ago if I put a fence in and it cost me $35 a linear foot versus now $237 a linear foot when you look at that $1 million bid. I also got a bid from Rhino Rock concrete wall because instead of going to somebody like, I think Strong is going to buy it from somebody else and then they're going to mark it up because they bought it from someone. I wanted to go direct to a source and have them do it. Their bid came in just for the wall was $387,000. We had everything else itemized it for traffic, so forth. A bid of $651,000. So, you know, we can save almost as much as paying for one of those jungle gyms over at the new park.
But you have a minute to cool jungle gym.
It is damn cool.
Can I ask you a question? Is that
Go ahead, lay it.
Golly, Sarge.
The bid that you received, is
Yes.
that for a hoe core or a solid? Because Rhino Rock does do a foam core wall.
Adam is here, and when you have your discussion, I'm sure you can ask him those questions. I don't know all of the ins and outs on that. The bid that we did included keeping a lot of the pillars that we have, replacing at least 100 of the ones that we have that had been deteriorating, and saving some money that way instead of just completely demolishing it. I think there are other options that we can look at that will not disrupt the city as much and keep the costs lower.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Dan Stratton, and one of the things that I've looked at, yes, I think we might want to take a look at some other options besides the concrete, is maybe cinder block, like there is already a cinder block wall on there. I don't know what that cost would be, but that would definitely, I think, be worth checking into. The other thing I want to bring up is the Alpine Highway is a part of our trail system, and it's designated as a main city trail almost the entire distance that we are talking here. And I know the city does maintain our great trail system, and I would encourage the city to continue the support of trails, because this one especially is used by walkers, joggers, runners, cyclists, bikers, cars, everybody alike. This is one of our biggest trails in the city of Highland. And I would really like to see that continue to be a really good first impression for our city. As people come in and use the Alpine Highway, that sets the tone for our city. And I would really like to see that. You know, I support the city being able to help us with the beautification and the safety of this project. And thank you.
Steve Hogan, 5335 West at 400 North. Thanks again, Council, Mayor, and all those involved, and neighbors and patrons. So just a few follow-up questions or comments and seeking clarification. By the way, if that is in fact part of an official or technical trail system, perhaps there are federal or state dollars available for those trail systems. I don't know, just a thought off the top of my head. As the code reads now, so in other words, if it was homeowner's responsibility and a windstorm came through and blew it all down, who would pay for it tomorrow? Because as I understand it, and again, please, I think I'm stating this right, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to be, according to the current code, a theme wall, which it would be probably the precast concrete. Does that mean, according to that approximate $1 million total divided by, I think we have about 27 homeowners along there, $37,000 apiece. How does that work? I'm just thinking, with all the storms we've had, and we've even had a couple in the last week, I was a little worried about our vent sections. So just a question on that. Again,
on the west of me and then on the south of me would be responsible for that. And as a resident, I would have no control over what they put in. According to the The materials that are designed or approved for installation, it ranges as long as it's a durable material, not wood. So I could have precast concrete on one side, cinder block on another side. And across the length of this fence, we're talking about, without a standard that is consistent across that, we could have, I think it was 27, was it 27? 27 or 30 different properties, each property owner with a different idea of what that fence would look like. And for a resident of Highland, that would be a terrible sight to see. I moved from an area that had cinder block walls up and down the streets, and every single homeowner had a different cinder block for their back wall. Whatever was on sale at that time was installed. And so we had pink, we had brown, we had texture, we had different things. Every length of home was different. And I would hate to see that along this beautiful highway. We love living here. And we love that road. It's beautiful. Leading up into Alpine, it's a wonderful place to see. And to have it disjointed all the way up would be a disaster for the city and something I wouldn't like to see. So I support everything that the homeowners behind me have said. As a non-homeowner along that fence, I would be more than happy to contribute so that there's consistency across that, so that we're unified in the look, the feel, and represent our city well. Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Robert Rios and I live at 5329 Wing Place in the Mystic Cove subdivision. And I've come tonight to stand in support of my neighbors who are affected immediately or impacted directly by the fence. I'm a 24-year resident of Highland, and when we moved here, we were just stunned by the beauty of this community. We have been impressed and amazed at the improvements that have been made on the 100 East Road that takes you through Highland. The city and you as a council have done a beautiful job. That fence was beautiful 24 years ago when it was built. We were one of the, I think we were the third or fourth house that came into the Mystic Cove subdivision. And back then, that was a beautiful fence. Those brick pillars with the wood, those popsicle wood slats were wonderful. But 24 years later now, they are just a prime example of functional obsolescence. It's time to make a change, and as has been said here tonight, it's unsafe with the amount of traffic that we now have, the increased amount of traffic. My neighbor, Tanner Edwards, is correct. I get to see his little girls out each day, and it would be a tragedy for a car to come through that fence and for someone to be injured. It would also be something that would increase the beauty of our community and something that would be a lasting legacy for this council to leave, that you could enjoy long after your service, knowing that this major thoroughfare is not only safe, but beautiful. Thank you for your work. Appreciate it.
My name's Adam Anderson, representative from Rhino Rock, one of the companies that give a bid. One of the four major manufacturers of precast concrete fencing in the state that supply concrete fencing across the U.S. So we supply concrete fencing in every state.
State, let's give the company you work for.
Rhino Rock. So we actually installed a concrete fence that is on the south side of the bank at what we always call the four-way crossing, where the bank is, Wells Fargo. We installed that fence 26 plus years maybe ago. We were not aware of the company that did give that bid. Fairly new company, and they're correct. They are marking up product. I would definitely, and you guys are all aware, you're putting bids out for companies, which is obviously great. There are lots of options between all four companies. You know, keeping them local obviously is what we recommend. But something I did learn tonight that hopefully the council does take into consideration is where that fence is placed. Something I learned during the meeting, who does own that fence? If it was me as the business owner, I would not be replacing that fence where it exists today. Just because liability-wise, whoever pays for that fence does have some say, but whatever property line it sits on, they also have a say. So you pay for it. Every one of the citizens that live next to that fence, they have a right. They have a right to take it out. They have a right to replace it. If any of that fence is there, they do have a right. The city of Highland City, of course, has the same right, but that would be definitely something I would clear up and in consideration before anything is done. So, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
I didn't want to call you
Angry guy. And one other thing that I wanted to point out is, according to UDOT, along that section of road, in the last 10 years, we've had a 29% increase in the traffic. I suspect that's only going to go up more with all of the development that's coming in here. That's also another consideration.
Anyone else like to come to address the council? Okay. Well, we'll bring the discussion back. Once again, this is just a discussion item. We kind of help us formulate as a city what maybe we'd like to do if we're looking for more bids, or if there's some ideas or concepts maybe we can bring forth.
I always have questions. This is for Andy. So the Tim Cove wall, which is rust colored and reddish rust colored, that's cinder block?
You're talking about that subdivision that I rebuilt about 10 years ago? That's a cinder block.
That's all cinder block. Do we have a idea if that's cheaper, more expensive? I mean, that's a nice looking wall, and that should last for a long time.
You know, I actually think the representative from Rhino Rock might be able to get us a better answer on that than I can. I don't know that type of fence.
It'd be interesting to know the comparison.
You might, the gentleman from Rhino Rock that just addressed this, I believe it was Andrew? Adam, I'm sorry, Adam. So the question is on cinder block versus the precast concrete, which is the more cost effective?
Precast, any precast, heavy R's will be cinder block, hands down. And it's not in cost, so actual material costs are a little bit lower in cinder block. It's that labor is a little more expensive, and they do a continuous footing. So that would be something that would be in consideration, as there are a lot of trees. Continuous footing, a lot of those trees need to come down. That is the benefit of doing any precast, is that you're doing pier footings. You're not disrupting and trenching that entire fence line. I know there's a lot of utilities on that road, and you would lose a lot of trees.
And that's the question as well. And just what type of range is the cast concrete per foot? I mean, I understand there's a lot of off-site work or other things that you've done, but how do you?
There's a lot of options. That's the benefit. In the 6 foot range, you're looking anywhere from 90 to 125. 125 would be at the very highest. There are Temple precast fences that will be more. They will be in the $175, $195 range. The walls around the Payson Temple. And there are several options that are a lot more expensive and decorative, but unless they're needed, added expense.
I range what your company, and actually there's a lot of off-site, like you said, there's a lot of bringing things in.
There's a lot of demolition. It's an old fence, old pillars. Where it's at, consideration of where it's at on the road. Traffic, it is a busy road, not a huge shoulder. Winding sidewalk, a lot of grass is going to get ruined, a lot of trees are going to get ruined. So, yep.
So another question I have, I think this was brought up by Sarah McGinnis, but when we put the East-West Corridor through Canal Boulevard, part of the settlement with the neighborhood, supported on that was the actually 11-foot kind of wall that we put along the south there. But UDOT agreed to do that. They built the road, MAC paid for the road. But my understanding is the 6 foot that goes from the river up to Alpine Highway was paid for by MAG through the city. Is that right? The city didn't pay for that out of pocket.
No, I mean, that project, the way that project evolved, the city didn't actually even pay a copay on that project, if you will. Like on 6800 West, we paid between us and Utah County and Lehigh, we paid 6.77% of the project on the east-west corridor, or Canal Boulevard, new section there. The total project expenses were paid through the MAG and county funding on that. So that project's a little hard to compare. I know a number of folks have suggested that maybe MAG funding or grant funding, at least through MAG, you wouldn't get any funding assistance on a fence like this. I'm not really aware of any grant programs. I don't want to say they're not out there. I'm just, what I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with any grant programs that would give us some assistance on replacing the fence. Generally, what we're going to get assistance is on something that we're going to do that's a larger project, and the fence is somewhat incidental to the project, if you will.
Well, such as 6800 West going down to Costco. When we widened that road, we took out some fencing. That was part of the whole scope of the project. We did put the fence in there, or MAG maybe put it in.
Well, some of them. I mean,
some, not all of them.
Maybe look at like Ron Peck on the west side. He actually paid for portions of his fence that the project really couldn't justify. Like in front of his field and stuff, the project couldn't really justify. Like there wasn't a need from a project standpoint to have a fence in front of his field. He wanted it for the look, so he paid for the fence in front of his. And so kind of always a mixture, but I don't really know a grant program that we could really go to for this type of fencing. I mean, the closest thing would be kind of blighted area renewal type grants, but I mean, this area isn't going to compete with some of the other lower income areas that you would go for. That type, like if you look at some really, really low income areas, they are the ones that would get those type of grants.
So that intersection, Alpine Highway and Givenotis Highway, every study I've seen, it's an F intersection, it fails. Does UDOT have any plans to redesign that intersection, and could that possibly impact, because I think the neighbors here are right, the traffic has increased dramatically, and there's some risk of people coming off that road because of increased traffic coming into their neighborhood. There's some safety issues. I'm just wondering if there would be any funding potentially through something like that.
Relative to the intersection, if we focus just on the intersection, yeah, there is a study that identified need for that intersection to have some improvements there to function better. And that was part of that study that UDOT did, that UDOT studied all the way, studied SR92 all the way from Center Street and Lehigh to the King. And they came up with various improvements at each intersection. So one of the intersections that has improvements identified in that study is that SR92 Orton Oaks Highway and Alpine Highway intersection. Right now, that's not yet funded. I mean, we haven't identified, hey, this is the cost, but it's not yet funded. We actually were even talking about with UDOT, today about how to get that on a funding list, but it's not yet identified for funding. So there certainly is an acknowledged need for improvements there, but not yet a funding source to do the improvements there. So we have an indefinite timeline on that.
So you talk about we had our active transportation plan. An active transportation plan is looking at trails and how we move through bikes and things that way. Are there active transportation grants? I think that was,
Right.
you know, I think, I went to train with Go Utah, and I don't remember them, they were more about building the bike lanes and things that way. Have you ever heard of?
Yeah, I think we could get a grant to, say put a trail along the corridor, but it's, the corridor is 29 feet. And so, we'd be able to build a trail in 29 feet, but it's highly unlikely that we'd be able to justify that the trail somehow impacts the full length of the fence, if you will, to be able to roll that into the grant. You'd probably have some areas where it's like, oh, we've got to do some changes in this given area to fit this trail through. I'm thinking of, some areas that have some constraints because of irrigation structures or other things, there may be some impacts, but, I don't want to claim that I have a fully exhaustive knowledge of every grant that's out there, and I certainly, would be a great thing to, have a little bit of discussion, even, with Dave Stewart, and see what he was aware of, that might be able to get us some grants there. The difficult part is that, as I say anything about grants, is that short of something that, really widens Alpine Highway and, turns it into some kind of 5-lane or something like that.
No.
There's that, I'm just going, concept-wise, there's enough room in the landscape that the facilities that you would get the grant for would fit in the landscape, short of something that just dramatically expanded the roadway. And so, you more or less from a project standpoint, the fence would be what it is. Because like you say, like Canal, the fences got built because, kind of came along with the new roadway, came along with the road project. It was kind of rolled into some of the agreements that were made with the adjacent property owners, and was a necessity for the fence. But up on top, where Ridgeview is, the project didn't even pay for the curb and gutter or sidewalk. Boyer paid for all the curb and gutter sidewalk and all the fencing, all the landscaping, everything, because there weren't impacts to that property, if you will. And so, as you know, I really love grant programs, and I will chase them all day long. And put us after a grant, we'll go for it. We'll figure out how to get that grant. But just off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with something that would necessarily, apply here, simply because, like I said, the closest thing I can think of is there are some, blighted area renewal type grants, but Highland's not really going to be viewed very highly as a blighted area. It's a beautiful place to live, and we compare it with some of those that would be in the running for that grant.
We just have a blighted fence.
Oh, we have a blighted fence.
Which is the problem. So let me just kind of summarize some things that I'm sure everybody else has. I've thought a lot about this. I live off the Alpine Highway. I have a lot of friends that live along this fence. I mean, I think we know without doubt this fence needs to be replaced for various reasons. For beauty, as an entranceway to the city, for safety. I think we've got some good arguments for safety and a lot of different things. And I think a fence that is of a more permanent nature is the way to go if we can figure out a way to pay for it. So whether that's concrete or cinder block or something. And I like the idea of a thin wall fence. Yeah, we could have a little different fence with each lot, and of course we've had this debate for many years. Finally have decided that, yeah, the fence is really the homeowners, but at the same time, the city and the city staff have told the people for years that it's a city fence. So again, I think the idea that we need to make sure exactly where the property lines are before anything's done, I think is very important. So the question comes to this, and I think we ought to look and see if there's any grants to help us. But my feeling is that it might need to be kind of a hybrid financing. The residents pay some, the city pays some. I kind of feel best about that. The question is where to get the funding and how much and how to do it. Now, there's been some ideas floated that maybe we can put together a fund in the city, some type of fund, and have a grant program I mean, there's been talking about maybe phasing this in. It'd be nice to do it all at once and probably be more cost effective, but if you don't have the financing to do it, it's still kind of an ideal situation because, you know, is it going to cost $1 million? I don't know. We've had bids here from other people for up to half or 2/3 of that, but it seems like it's always more expensive. And of course, I brought up previously, if we destroy all the landscaping on the parkway, are we going to xeriscape all of that and replacement? So that's a question that we need to kind of answer, or whether we put back sod and things. So there's a lot of things, and I think my personal opinion is this is a discussion item. We're not making a decision tonight. I think it would be good to set up some sort of committee with the neighbors and have people look and come up with lots of different ideas. Because the big thing is, the idea is to have this nice, beautiful thin wall, all concrete along the Alpine Highway. The promise is where to find the funding. So $1 million, our general fund budget this year is around $13 million. So that's a significant portion of the city budget. And so where do we come up with that? I mean, we're trying to finish this park that we've been working on for 17 years, and there's a lot of other demands on the money. And I don't think we can go to the rest of the citizenry and say we're going to raise your taxes so we can fix the fence. You know, it's kind of a dilemma for me. I'm trying to think out the best way, but I would lean towards some sort of maybe a fund, and we'd have to deliberate how much that would be to kind of maybe issue grants ourselves and have the neighbors kind of come together and see. But that's just my idea. I'd like to see it done. Ideal is, but who's going to pay for it and how much is the big problem. And so hopefully the other members on the council have the answer to that, because I'm sure you've thought about it as well.
I agree with Scott. I think it would be great to have a committee to look at it with the neighbors. I think it would be great to explore some creative options like having service projects or something, if there's anything that can be done that way to do any part of the tree trimming or the removal of some of this other stuff. So maybe talk with the neighbors and kind of see what their ability is to contribute to the project in that way as well, not just financially, but also maybe labor or something as well. But I think we just are going to need to come up with creative solutions. But I don't think it's a problem that we can just say, good luck, it's on you. Like, I think we need to think through options also.
So you're saying we have some responsibility?
Yeah, I don't know what level of responsibility, but I think we need to have a good discussion about it, and I think we need to take a good look. Andy, is the fence on consistently on city property line, or is it on the residents' property lines, or do we not know?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I would assume it's on the common property line. A lot of our newer parkway details, the fences are actually on the property owner's lot. They're like, you know, and then the parkway details on the easement, but a lot of the older properties, it's on the property line. So I don't know that I can answer that across the board here.
Well, I think whatever we end up doing, we need to have a plan for going forward as well, so that we don't have the same discussion in however many years.
Mr. Mayor, could it be possible to enlist the assistance of our current consultant that we already have on retainer to check into this?
And that's what David Stewart's, the city's hired a consultant. As FYI, we pay $100,000 a year for this consultant to go out to legislators to help advocate for different things. We got back $1 million so far this year, and we still have our retainers, so we can be able to ask, hey, what are the programs that the things Dave Stewart actually goes to Highland that he might go find for us.
Yeah, because it could be in an area that we're not even aware of, or some type of grant money that we aren't even aware of. Was it Mr. Edwards? Is that, okay. You brought up, I like your point, and I appreciate the fact that you're concerned about the safety of your children. I guess your assertion is that if a car comes through the yard, this concrete wall is going to stop it, the wooden fence will be obliterated and still go into your yard. Is that what you're saying?
Or it'll stop it more. The concrete would stop it more, where a car would just obliterate it.
Gentleman from District UC, Mr. Rhino.
They won't stop any car. There is not actual precast concrete fence that is designed to stop any vehicle at all. A UDOT fence is not designed to stop a vehicle or a truck.
Okay. I think you're right, though. I think it would be more effective. Like, it's a glancing blow, which it probably would be. I doubt someone's going to make a 90-degree turn and go straight into the fence. It'd be kind of a side-swipe situation, and I think the concrete would do much better with a side-swipe situation. So maybe we could get it from that angle and any other angles that the consultant will know about. So on my third point, I agree with Scott and Brittany that a public-private partnership, and perhaps if we did a public-private partnership, they could get some sort of a grant or reimbursement. They could enter into an agreement individually to come to a consensus on maybe design, and in that way circumvent all the inefficiency of inherent in government. So, I agree.
Sarah, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I'm just listening because, the previous council, I said it's clear to me that I think the city has not been clear with the residents who has owned the fence. So I don't think that we're legally responsible, but I do think ethically it would be nice if we came up with some kind of solution, like the grant program idea, to help the residents with this fence. I do think it needs to be fixed. The posts, the brick posts, as I was driving and walking by there not too long ago, a lot of them are falling apart. It's not just the wood pieces, it's also the pillars are also getting in a pretty good disrepair state. I don't know what the answer is, so I'm listening intently, I'm looking at the information. I don't know what my final opinion is, but I definitely think the city should be supportive of helping the residents fix this problem.
Maybe just to kind of help you, there have been some that may be questioned about the zoning here at the town center. I went and looked at some history of what the timing was of town center, commercial, and some things that way. It appears some of the subdivisions started, somewhere right around about 95, they're getting improved, building in 96. The town center concept was presented in 95. Actually, Taco Amigo came and presented the one to do right next to where Art Circle's at. There was a vote to try to, if they would go, the vote, they wanted it to be zoned commercial. The vote went 2 to 3. They went to deny it, and there were 3 council people said, oh, we'll zone it next to Art Circle to be commercial. And that was in 97. Just trying to figure out some time. Some thoughts. I think all of us are kind of thinking similar. I look at it and, okay, what's been over the last 22 years or whatever, when this fence went in, or been 25 years, the city's helped maintain this. The city's taken on some costs and some responsibility. That's where the problems kind of come in. But there was also benefits to the residents because the city did do some maintenance. And now we know we have single projects that help do some of the stadiums. We're not the same as only city staff. There's times city staff went out. That's where the confusion comes in. Now, as we start looking at it, as you notice, the bid comes in high. What the council, or I would recommend, if we want to put a committee together, we do that. The grant process would look as follows. If the city does it, we can't, you can see the cost. Everything has to be full engineered, everything's going to be a little higher cost. If the residents do it, there's residents ingenuity that they can get some bids, maybe a little bit competitive or some things in that way, and work with the contractor, where if the city gets in, there has to be all this bonding. What might be the best is what you guys mentioned, is a bond or a grant process. We've been talking about going out and getting grants between the city, opposite grants to the residents. That if they go and replace the fence, that there's some dollar amount, that would be a grant that they could be submitted to obtain back to help towards that. I think that's what some of the council's been talking about. So we have a grant on the opposite end that, and then we have to have it funded. One of the problems we go and fund it. So I was just thinking if there's 30 homes there, you want a dollar amount, it could be anywhere from $75,000 to $125,000 as a grant program. You go put that in the budget with thinking that people submit. Now, Rob, the question came up. The fence is a wood fence. It can be replaced back as a wood fence, correct? So, according to our code, it can be a wood fence.
Correct. So we have standards for beam walls now, which actually don't really allow wood fences, but the code has been said regarding reconstructing a fence, is you reconstruct it back to what was originally approved, unless the council approves something else. So I could see and we don't really have a formal process, kind of just how we would want to handle it, but it could be that the council looks at a couple different options and says, we're fine with a precast fence that looks somewhat like this. Maybe we're also still fine with the original wood fence, or maybe just want one option. We could, come with some designs and say, if you pick between these three designs, we're fine with it, if that's part of the grant reimbursement, or it's part of whatever other options it comes up with. So, code right now is, if you have to build it and reconstruct it per what was originally approved, unless the council gives you something else as an approval.
Now, and I know for safety residents, it sounds like they like to have a fence there, but by code, it's been built by the developer, it's met the development code at that time of development. They could take down the fence and have no fence, correct?
Correct. I mean, like with any other city improvement, if we were going to mandate that someone have some kind of physical thing on their property that the city says you have to have this here, that's effectively taking their property for public use. So we either have to relocate the fence on the city property or work with every property owner along there to get an easement or some other kind of permission for the city to do that work. But other than that, you have to, they have the right to take it down because it's on their property.
So, I mean, is there a possibility that the fence could be phased in sections because of expense?
And that's your other thing,
I mean, start at one end and say, we're gonna work on this side, get there, and then I think we need to look at all the property lines that are on the plats, and then make sure the fence is really.
We want to answer it. So here's the question, couple of council, I think it was Scott and Brittany, you guys mentioned the committee. So if it's a committee, the reason I wanted to bring all these up is these are things that need to be talked about. And here's my concern. If you've ever had a neighbor that put a fence in the middle of you, and they ever come and ask you to help share it, there seems to sometimes be a dispute. We're talking about fences for 30 individuals. We can't think that all 30 would think alike and all have the funds to go move forward. So I'm nervous about how we affect the feelings in the neighborhood. And I'm more nervous about how we work with that. And so as a committee, we have to be sensitive. That's why, Scott, you're talking phasing where things that way, because there should be some that do not have the financial wherewithal to move forward. And so that's going to have to be thought of and how to work through some of those. Would you guys like to, you both brought up a committee, would both of you like to serve on a committee to give us residents? You've heard some of the concerns, and then maybe come back and give a recommendation on how we try to do some type of solving of this issue?
I'd be happy to do that.
So we can't have more than 2 council members because they form a quorum. So you both mentioned this. I'm sorry you mentioned this. So you kind of own it. So it'd be Scott and Brittany. You both would help me with some residents, and then come back and maybe give the council some suggestions. So you can work with Rob, and maybe it might be wise to order a survey and find out what his property line is at. Well, what the rest of the council feels about expenditure to go and find a survey so we really know where this line is at.
I think we need to establish that critically, since there's been so much debate.
I mean, we need to know if the fence, if they're replacing it, is it moving back, does it have to move forward? So no matter what, we want to go back and my recommendation is 100%, not on the property line, but it's 100% on the private property owner's property. That would be the recommendation. When I built my fence, I moved it 6 inches in, so I knew I owned it. There wasn't a question. Essentially, that might be kind of the. So with that, we'll go ahead and form that, and if there's some residents that like maybe you can kind of reach out. I know that there's been several here with some notes we can get, and I know Scott, you know several in that area. So, is there anything, other questions the residents have on how we're trying to move forward? Committees we have to be careful because it can slow things down. But, we were kind of joking, okay, we started right now, we heard this money in the budget, we're going to pass the budget next council meeting. If it's not there, it has to be, and so that's your problem. Where's the money come from to put in there? But you have to, I would recommend you give enough time to get probably 2 seasons to put a fence in. If we did it right now, I'd be thinking, okay, that grant's good till October of 2024. You got to give it 2 building seasons, I think, to really get something done. Anything else? Any other? Come play some of the mic, because everything has to be recorded, and we have it on video.
I mean, I like Mike Martin, I'm an angry guy. I like the thought of, can you take and split it over 2 or 3 budget cycles and build a contingency, $250,000 this year, $250,000 next year, and have that set up? Or do we go for a bond? Do we apply for a bond to get the improvements? I'm just throwing it out there. What grants are available? I don't know.
We're willing to look at grants. I don't, at least from what we're hearing, I don't think you're gonna see the city pay for the whole fence. This is $250,000. And I'm just, for me, you have to remember, this is still taxpayer dollars. We're trying to mitigate an issue that's kind of up, but it also benefits the residents who are on the fence.
Sure.
I mean, we are improving private property.
Yeah, but we've been told for me, 26 years that it's not mine, I can't touch it. You guys own it, screw off. That's what I've been told from the city. So now to come and say, well, you're going to be responsible. Well,
But if you were doing that 23 years, we also help maintain it, so it can cost
well, yeah, but I would disagree with that because I've replaced probably at least 30 or 40 of the slats on my own on the back. And I took the time to stain it. I think I've seen the guys out there maybe twice.
I think
So.
perhaps we should take the path that we've decided on, which is to see if there's grant money.
Sure.
Utilize a resource that we've already paid for, which is our grant consultant.
Yes.
See if he can squeeze some money out for us, which he's been so far a very good return on investment. See if he can help us out, see where we can get money, and kind of go from there. But I agree with your frustration.
Let's go ahead and let the committee.
One other thing, if I can, real quick. It just seems to my point earlier, we've been here for a long time. We paid for this for a long time. We get put to the back of the bus and all the new stuff gets taken care of and we get ignored. And then told we can't touch it. And then we go, I don't know how much time you guys spent going back looking at notes to go back to 1995 to say, oh, that's the homeowners, not the cities. I don't know how much time and resources we spent on that. It just seems like the city just wants to sidestep it. I
think by having meetings tonight, we're showing that, even by saying we're trying to spend, I think we're trying to say we're listening, we're trying to be finding a solution.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Angry guy.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we will now move on to our next agenda items. Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead. It's now 9:28. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Our 5-minute Wednesday on resolution of an interlocal cooperative agreement with Utopia. Wait 1 second. I'm sorry. So we're going to discuss the interlocal cooperation agreement with Utopia, and that will be our city attorney, Rob Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We've talked about this several times, just by way of an update of the recent history. This was brought to the city as a request from Utopia that we first considered in December of last year. We tabled it to consider some options that he was looking at in terms of what the city might want to do for a city fiber option or city partnership. As part of that, Utopia, we added some provisions to the franchise agreement saying that we could buy out Utopia's lines within a 1-year option, or and if we do partner with them, we get to count customers as part of the take rate that they've had prior to that, so from whenever this is executed onward. There were a lot of discussions regarding fiber, what the city wanted to do. In our last meeting, we had a discussion item. The council gave staff direction to bring back franchise agreements. We have 2 pending, Utah Broadband and Utopia, to bring it back for potential review. We don't have Utah Broadband. They couldn't make this one, so we're anticipating they'll be on our next agenda, but Utopia is here. There's some additional questions, so I was just going to highlight some legal requirements. Generally, the reason why we have franchise agreements is cities have the authority to regulate their streets and what goes into it, and to grant franchises or not. There was some recent litigation with Utopia. This was, I think, an item that was discussed. There was one of the main claims, and this was not determinative of everything, and I'm sure there's 2 sides of the story, but there was a federal claim regarding whether Utopia was entitled to certain protections under federal telecommunications law. The arguments that were presented were dismissed by the Judicial Court, meaning American Court 1 saying Utopia wasn't entitled to those because, among other reasons, they're a public entity. They're not a private provider. So that does give the city some more discretion. What to do with that is up to the city council. Staff does not have a particular position. We had heard from council's previous direction. We wanted to kind of allow competitors to come into Highland to go franchise agreements and provide options to Highland residents however they wanted to. So that is what we're allowing. Just review the franchise agreement terms. Like most franchise agreements, allows them to use the city's streets, requires them to obtain all city excavation and construction permits, provide all their plans, comply with our construction and excavation guidelines, restoration requirements. They have to provide safety and barricading and all that type of thing. Provide the city notice when they're working in our right of way. They have to fix all property they damage. The term of the contract is 15 years with an automatic 1-year renewal up to a maximum of 50 years. At the end of the 15-year, and every 1 year, we can cancel it with a sufficient notice. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we added these provisions. We have the 1-year option to purchase their facilities at fair market value. There's a process set up in the contract for how we would determine that. There are some solutions that they needed those facilities for their own backbone or other public entities. Otherwise, if we decided in 1 year from now, or whenever you decided to grant this, to buy them out, we would figure out a number and work on that. And then the second provision was if we partnered with them, that was kind of we wanted to work with Utopia as part of a citywide fiber option. They would count all of their customers as part of the take rate, and they wouldn't count their expenses as part of the revenue sharing that we'd have to pay them back for, up to this point. So those are the basic terms. Happy to answer any questions. I have a motion to approve. I have a motion to deny. Just allow me to consider what the council wants to do. Of course, Councilmember Smith.
So, let me turn the microphone on. So, if we enter in this interlocal agreement tonight, there is no obligation for us to partner with them. We're basically treating them as any other franchise utility.
Correct.
But this also allows them, I mean, this originally started because the interest between Utopia and Ridgeview, but this allows them to go anywhere in the city. But they would compete with any other fiber, and I guess Utah Broadband's thinking about doing an agreement as well. Is that right?
Correct.
But this doesn't obligate the city in any way
there is no financial obligation from the city on this point. We're not spending a single dollar on this. Utopia will decide where and how they want to expand. If this is granted, they'll pick the streets, the locations, the neighborhoods, and expand where they feel it is appropriate for their business model. Just like a private provider, Comcast or CenturyLink or whoever else might come in, will decide where they want to go according to their studies and revenue models.
So this is a question for Andy. So if they go through and lay their fiber and things, and we just resurfaced Canal Boulevard again, if they, do they usually go into the side, or do they go down the street, or, I mean, what happens, and are they responsible to repair everything?
So where you are right now, at least as far as I'm aware, and we don't have any type of moratorium on new pavements, meaning I don't believe we have anything in our code that says, hey, if we overlaid the road last year, you can't disturb the road for 3 years or 5 years or some period of time. And so right now, we would allow them to go. I mean, we do work with these providers saying, hey, that road is brand new. We've got to limit disturbance, etc. But they have to always cross the roads. When it comes to the fiber providers, the power, the gas, others, unless it's completely unavoidable, we require them to run, when they're running parallel to the road, to go into public utility easements. Where it would be unavoidable is where there is some obstruction that just makes it, impossible, or where those just don't exist. A lot of the older roads that don't exist along the road, the older parcels. But typically, we would require them to bore first, or try to bore first, and fail for whatever reason before we would let them open cut, say, a new road that's fairly new. But even when they bore, they have to go in and state law requires them to identify all the utilities that they're going to cross with the directional bore, and so they have to go in and do a little core on top of each of the utilities to figure out exactly where those are and how deep they are. So there is some damage that happens to the street in that. Now, these days with those cores, we require them to put back that same core in, and they essentially adhere it in place, and so it's a better patch than in days past. But there is, with the installation process in existing streets, there's going to be some impact on the road, even if everything goes perfectly. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it does. It's helpful. Thank you.
Rob, I have a question. For Utopia, so is their franchise fees the same as any other company would be?
If they are subject to it, yes. There's some weird limitations under federal law regarding telecommunications providers where internet service providers only generally aren't subject to the normal telecommunications tax that we have. But if they do lease it out to anyone who, because they're, my understanding, and I can be corrected, is they kind of provide the facility and then they lease out capacity to others. So if someone else does engage in what would be defined as telecommunications, then that would be subject to our telecommunications tax as with any other provider, regardless of who they leased it from.
So, Utopia, Utopia would have the same financial impact on the city as anybody else would. They're not paying a different franchise fee. They're not paying a different, a different tax on revenue that comes in. There's nothing that is different or that gives Utopia an added benefit because of their.
Well, I guess the question, if they're a tax exempt company, they're only cities, if they're tax exempt, do we still collect sales tax or things that way? Maybe that'd be a question for Roger. I mean, are we receiving the same, I think there was.
We're receiving the same benefit that we would.
Same financial benefit with the Utopia versus those Comcast or Centricom or whoever it is.
Yeah, our tax exempt stuff only applies to our own costs. As far as our relationship with the city, we look just like a private company, except for the idea that in the sense that we do wholesale, there'll be a retail provider, and the private retail provider will pay the same taxes that any other private company would. So we're not directly paying any sort of franchise tax to the city, but it's just like any other company. CenturyLink and Comcast don't pay you any franchise fee for internet. Comcast will pay you a cable franchise fee, and they're the only ones because they have cable. They still have some cable, but they're moving people to Peacock streaming, and they don't pay you any franchise fees on that. CenturyLink does not pay you any sort of franchise fee for internet service, but they do on phone. But on our network, if someone gets phone service, the same 3.5% municipal telecommunications tax applies to that service as it would CenturyLink or anybody else. So to that question, from a revenue perspective in the city, we look just like any other option.
So I guess, okay, let me ask this, like Strata. I'm just saying, because they're trying to do a similar model down the way. Is Strata, they're the wholesaler, and they're going to have like Bluehost, whatever on top, but similar like you guys do. Would Strata be anything that Lehigh has a sales tax or anything that way? So they're, and that's going to be the same as you. So if it's Strata, you're both the same.
Yeah, if we want to like support an effort to get revenue from these types of networks, we're on your side of the table because we're cities. We wish we could. But there's federal law that doesn't allow it. There's an Internet Tax Freedom Act.
So that would be the next one, since you are owned by cities, you know, that city's revenue, now you're going into one that has not entered into an agreement to do Utopia program. I mean, I think one of the questions is cherry picking. Would there be past Ridgeview, do you see going past anywhere? We kind of felt we want the free market. Well, if Utopia wanted to go rest of Highland and do everything, we probably wouldn't fight, I don't know.
Yeah, so we have more relationships like this than we do fiber to the home. Like we have franchise agreements with almost every city along the Wasatch Fronts, southern Utah, Cache Valley, and the Wasatch Back. There's probably 5 we don't have, and you're one of them. You're unique, and we'd love to take you off that list. The first opportunity came to us, actually, we got an order from UETN. They ordered the service from us for Highland Elementary School, and then we realized we don't have a franchise agreement, can't get permitting. We canceled the order, so they were paying more than they would if we could have connected them. That one was kind of the first one, and then it was Ridgeview, I guess, is the developer. The developer came in, I think it was Boyer Group, came in and said, hey, we'd like to have Utopia in there because it helps us sell properties and people really like it. It's the best service in Utah. And so they wanted to work with us and coordinate on getting conduit and fiber in there. And that's when we ran up against the roadblock because we were actually putting some conduit in there, got caught like, oh crud, wait, we can't continue this because we don't have a franchise agreement. And so we're kind of just stuck, hoping we could, where it makes sense, we can make it work and we pay for it. There's no cost to the city, there's no obligation. There are some like upsides in the sense that someday if you did decide to do a citywide project, we put in some language to help with that. An example of that would be like Bountiful City. They've approved agreement for us to do a citywide project for them. We didn't have it in our franchise agreement with them, but we put in almost $1 million of fiber in the city. They have agreed to buy that from us, and they already have, even though the agreement is brand new, they already have a whole bunch of customers and revenues. They're further ahead than Lehigh, who's been working on their project for 2 years. And so there is a benefit to us kind of going in and building this and generating customers and revenues off this if you ever do decide to do a fiber home project in the future. But this discussion is not for that. Just treat us like Comcast or CenturyLink or anybody as far as this agreement.
So Rob, financially, there's no difference for the city if Utopia comes via level franchise agreement, Utopia versus Utah Broadband versus anybody else. It's 100% the same impact.
For us, the same, yes.
To the city.
And I'll say, I looked at, how we can impose franchise fees in a lot of cities for internet service providers only. It's hard. And that's why, there's a reason why that's not kind of widely known, but in terms of just this question, they're the same in terms of everyone else. Their public status doesn't change what revenues the city may or may not see from them. That's not the reason we're not collecting anything from them.
Yeah, if you had terms with everybody else, we would just say, yeah, we're good with those. I mean, we're not trying to get any sort of special treatment or anything.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move the city council approve the resolution for the interlocal cooperation agreement with Utopia for the installation of their facilities within Highland City rights of way and authorize the mayor to sign the resolution and agreement.
I have a motion by Brittany. Seeing no second, that motion dies. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion. Can we put up the, I move that the city council deny the request for an interlocal agreement with Utopia for a franchise for the city rights of way.
A motion by Sarah,
I'll second it.
a second by Scott. Is there further discussion before we go to vote? Seeing none, let's go ahead and go to vote.
So yes means no.
If you're voting yes, you're denying the request for the interlocal agreement from Utopia.
So what happens if it's 2-2?
And the mayor would vote.
Good time, Mayor.
Okay, so do you have anything you want to say?
You know, I'm not sure, if we look at the revenue, I'm not sure why we're trying to look at, if Utopia's financial end for the city's the same, I'm not sure why we're trying to do something different for Utopia. I understand they're a government entity, but I guess one concern you have to go to, and I'm going to argue both sides. One is they're owned by government entities, so it's government funds using to come in. But if our goal is to get internet for our residents to have fiber, why do we really care? I guess I would be okay.
I've heard an argument that they would not be paying the same taxes.
No, we heard.
No, but what I'm saying is we've heard to the contrary from this gentleman. Remind me what your name is?
Roger.
Roger, okay. Roger that. So we've heard to the contrary, so the previous argument is no longer valid, which is we're not receiving any benefit from, let's say, franchisees, et cetera. Didn't he state that we would be receiving the same as we would from his competitors?
According to Rob, what we are hearing is if this was Comcast, doing the same service that Utopia is going to be providing, we would get the same revenue if it was Comcast or Utopia. Am I stating that correct, Rob?
So there really is no disadvantage to doing this, because what this is doing is opening up the free market to them and other people that are willing to come in and invest in the city. And if they rip up the roads, they gotta fix the roads.
Correct. Just like any other.
When I say
I'm treating them as any other. I'm not trying to weigh on the policy side of this. In terms of what the city sees, they are the same impact to the city as any other provider. We treat them the same in terms of their excavation and construction permits, their remediation and repair work. We'll hold them to the same standards, require them to do all the same work. If we get telecommunication taxes off of them, we will to the same extent we would off of any other internet service provider that puts in fiber within Highland. That may not be a lot depending on how their business model operates, not because of their, again, not because of their public status, but because of what the service they provide is. Meaning there's the restrictions on what can be taxed in the telecommunications service.
Just because this could go to 2-2 vote, I'd like to understand the two that are not wanting the request. I want to understand your concerns, because maybe I was not aware of those concerns.
So I'll tell you my concerns. Is one, I have been approached as citizens that are very opposed to Utopia in any form for whatever reason. And I have had no one come to me really wanting us to do Utopia. So I feel like my decision making kind of reflects what I've heard from some of the citizens. The other thing is I think Roger kind of admitted one thing I've been hung up on is, quote, they got caught. They were putting in conduit stuff before they came to us at first, and that bugs me because, yes, they are, that's similar to a franchise agreement, but they are government. They know how things should be done, and it just kind of bugs me. So I've just had a hard time with that, and I'm just going to have to represent the people who are really opposed, because I really not had anybody come to me and say, we really want you to join Utopia. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
said back and forth, and what we've heard back and forth about Utopia. A lot of cities have gotten into a sour taste in their mouth, working with Utopia, and just my gut is saying it is a bad idea. And so I'm going to go with that.
Can I just ask, because we've also heard Comcast, we've heard a lot of residents complain about Comcast.
Yes.
So would we, if Comcast was coming in, and the residents were happy with Comcast, would you also want to deny Comcast? I'm just,
Yeah, I think it does make a difference for me that they're a government agency versus a commercial agency. I think that's a big differentiator for me. And I don't appreciate their business model, haven't appreciated how they have dealt with us as a city so far. And so it just has added up to, you're right, a lot of people are not happy with Comcast, and I probably would make a different decision with Comcast because they're commercial, not governmental.
But I think the bad taste that we've had in our mouths was regarding the guarantee of profitability over an extended period of time with no guarantee of upgrades in technology. But that's off the table, if I'm not mistaken. We're not guaranteeing their profitability. And I think a lot of people from other cities didn't like that, no offense, they didn't like that either. I don't like it because how about if you guarantee my profitability? I'd like that. But obviously, so with that aspect off the table, I just think it's free market. And after my speech on capitalism earlier,
I was going to bring that up.
yes, I'm sure I'll be mocked for that, but that's okay.
And that's where the differentiation comes for me from, it's like really a government agency versus a commercial agency. It seems like they're trying to act like a commercial agency, but they're not. They're a government.
I just think it gives people more options, especially since we're not obligated to guarantee the profitability.
Yeah, I do love that we're not obligated to guarantee the profitability.
And I think that's where that taste that you mentioned came from other people, hearing from cities that, well, we didn't get the take rate that we thought we would, and so we're on the hook, but that's off the table.
Yeah.
And we have the option, if we don't like you, we can buy you out. So that's also another option.
And that, quite frankly, leaves a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth too. That, hey, we're gonna come in, we'll build it, and then if you don't like us, you can,
I see what other clients, but
I just, so the whole model doesn't work for me personally. I see what you're saying, Tim.
yeah.
I just don't feel like I can support it.
Okay.
We have a motion before us. This is, the move is to deny the request, so a yes vote is to deny the request. There's no further discussion.
Mayor, can I make one clarification? I know that there is some frustration regarding Utopia laying conduit before they had a franchise agreement, right? And I understand that frustration. Again, of course, this is your decision, but just so you know, they are not the only ones who do that. It seems to be a common practice that you may lay conduit, but you're not going to run the fiber until you have a franchise agreement. So it hasn't just been them. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify that one point, but we'll see what the council decides.
So the motion is a yes to deny the request. Just want to make sure. So now if we're ready to vote. Okay, we're now going to start with a vocal vote. We're going to go Tim.
No.
Scott.
Yes.
Brittany.
No.
Sarah.
Yes.
The mayor is a no. Okay, that motion does not pass. Is there any other motion that would like to come before on this item?
Can I make the same motion I made earlier?
Are we okay, Rob, going back to the same motion?
I'll second it.
We'll make the motion.
I move the city council approve the resolution for the interlocal cooperation agreement with Utopia for the installation of their facilities within the Highland City Raceway and authorize the mayor to sign the resolution and agreement.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by by Brittany, second by Tim. Any further discussion? Okay, now we will go with this.
So yes is yes.
Yes is you're approving that Utopia can have an interlocal agreement. Okay, we will start with Scott.
No.
Brittany.
Yes.
Sarah.
No.
Tim.
Yes.
And the mayor is now also a yes. So that passes 3-2. And I did get the votes today, so that's, okay, we will now move on to item number 6, which is action safe route to schools grant Highland Elementary, and that is Amy Spencer.
Are we continuing the meeting past 10 o'clock?
Oh, it's past 10. Do I have a motion to go past 10 and what time?
How many things do you have left?
We have number 6, number 7, and communication.
I move that we continue the meeting for 12 minutes.
You can't continue it for 12 minutes, that would make it
How about
19.
Until 10:25.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Let's go with number 6. We have Andy on the Highland Elementary.
Okay, I'm gonna move fast. Okay, we've all talked about in 2021, we applied for a grant for safe routes to school for Highland City. We were awarded the grant. Part of that grant, we have to enter into a federal aid agreement. Basically says whatever the project costs above the grant funding we have to pay. Just as a reminder, the project is to put sidewalks below Highland Elementary and to screen Highland Elementary is on the top left. So first place we would work on is the sidewalks on 6000 West and on 10680 North. That provides the best bang for your buck, if you will, gets the most kids off the busiest roads. The second place that we would put the grant funds is behind the school. 2 years ago, we paved the drop-off area, but we weren't able to pave a lot of the sidewalk area and bike parking area. So if we just look at the basic facts of the grants, when we applied for the grant, our project estimate in 2021 was just a little under $200,000. The grant that we received was for $130,000. In tentative fiscal budget that you would consider adopting next week or in 2 weeks, we've set aside $100,000 for this project. So that gives us a total project budget of $230,000. There is one property that's on 6000 West that their property line still goes out to the center of the road. All the other properties, you know, the right of way is going to obtain, so we'll have to obtain that right of way. That does have to be completely obtained by the city. That would be, we would use some of our $100,000 set aside to acquire that property. In discussion with UDOT about this interlocal agreement, I said, look, $200,000 in 2021 is not $200,000 in 2023. We've experienced extreme inflation. And UDOT has indicated that the scope can be flexible. I've told them that what we'll do is we'll put our money towards the 6000 West improvements first, and then 10680, and then to back the school. And as a provision of the grant, we do have to include in our advertisements non-discrimination verbiage. That's in a lot of the federal grants, and so that's not unanticipated. So with that, while we may not get as far as we thought that we would get with this project, getting some done is certainly better than getting none done, is the way that I'm looking at that, and so would recommend your approval.
I think this is a no-brainer, so I'd like to make a motion.
Let's move the motion.
Okay. I move that the Highland City Council approve the federal aid agreement for the Highland Elementary Safe Routes to School grant and authorize the city engineer to sign the contract documents.
I'll second.
I just have a question. This is the city engineer signing? Is that?
The reason why it's me in this case is because they have a digital signing, and
okay.
It's all set up for me to sign. Typically, it would be you, Mayor.
I was just wondering, that was great. Okay.
It's a little odd, but they've set it all up for me to sign. I don't really usually have authority to sign anything, but in this case, if you authorize me, I'll sign it and we'll go.
Sarah, are you able to get logged in?
Well, it's saying it has been received, but it's not coming up, so.
Okay, so Sarah, what's your?
Yes.
Yes, what's the rest of the votes? That passes 4-0. We now are on item number 7, which is an action item for road widening project at 9th Avenue and Old Fish Lane.
Old Fish Lane. rather unique intersection because the west side is Knight Avenue and the east side is Old Fish Lane. Mayor and Council, we've talked about this as an upcoming project. We petitioned UDOT and they have found that the intersection of Knight Avenue and Old Fish Lane and North County Boulevard, this is the road that's north of the soccer parks. We'll just look at the graphic here. It's the road that's north of the soccer park. That they will install a traffic signal, but in order for that traffic signal to work properly, we have to widen the city side streets. And UDOT will not pay for the widening on the city side streets. And so essentially where you see the solid lines on the north side of the road, each side, both on Old Fish Lane and on Knight Avenue, is where we will do the rework of those roads to make them wide enough to then have the traffic signal. And so if we will do our part, UDOT will follow shortly thereafter and install the traffic signal. The contractor's bid with contingency is $258,000. That will come out of both this year's and next year's road funds because the construction will occur and will span the budget year, if you will. We'll do some work in June, we'll do some work in July. Again, I think this is a great thing both for the city soccer parks and for the high school kids and for those that live on the east side of the road because there's a number of people have expressed to us to make a left turn onto North County Boulevard some times a year is difficult. Sometimes a day is difficult. So I think this is a great thing all around and would encourage your support.
Just a couple comments. I actually had someone from UDOT that I know well said that he could not believe that you got this through UDOT. Because I know it's a problem with the high school drivers and different things, and they're going to drive to school and regardless of what we try to do. So, and I appreciate all your work on this, and obviously if we're going to have this signal light, and they're at least $250,000, aren't they?
Yeah, UDOT is probably going to put in a larger investment than we are in this regard, or at least equal, but probably not.
So in your opinion, is this going to help the neighborhoods to the north?
The hope is that it will, because, very anecdotally and very quickly, our new signal at 5600 West has actually made it a little easier to make a left turn out of Macy's in some of those areas. It's created a little bit of additional gaps. Is it going to be the difference maker to where they don't have any problems? No, but it's certainly going to improve the condition for those north, especially those kind of in the country club neighborhoods that have expressed concern with that.
I think one of the frustrations was the continuous right turn coming up SR92. They do the continuous right onto North County Boulevard. That won't change. This light won't affect it. There was a discussion, when you talked about this area or moving it up, some of it was even the safety of trying to move that light up because it was starting to warm. But then the safety issues were coming up and how you're trying to stop all that traffic so close to SR92. So, luckily, like you said, we did a great job here, got this approved. This will really help, hopefully, some of our high school students. We have a lot of accidents right here in this area. So hopefully this will save lives and save
That is
kids'
the
lives.
most terrifying part of the city at 2:30. I'm like 100% in favor of this.
Well said.
I'm going to make one more comment. I know we're running out of time, but the fellow who was the bishop when this old bishop came in, he's now patriarch, so I think we need to rename this city street.
Is there a motion?
I move the city council approve the construction contract with Acme Construction for the construction of site improvements at Knight Avenue, Old Fish Lane, and North County Boulevard in an amount of $258,155 and authorize the city administrator to sign the contract documents.
I'll second.
Okay, have a motion by Brittany, second by Sarah. Ready for vote?
Sorry. I'm not usually the one running the vote, falling down my knees.
Sarah?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do our best. That passes 4-0. We're now on the expedited. Expedited number A is a resolution of personnel policy amendment for bereavement leave. That is J.
Tonight I'll be talking about another amendment to the Personnel Policy Manual. Back in March, Council discussed the idea of amending personnel policies to allow for leave for employees who experience a miscarriage or stillbirth. This was also codified in Utah Code 10-3-1103, and so this is just updating our policy manual to square with the state code. What you can see before you here is the additions and removals and general cutting up of the what was formerly called the funeral leave policy. We like to rename it the bereavement leave. There's more to that than just the funeral. So you can see what's being added and what's being taken out, and this is what the policy will look like now.
Maybe that's a question. So Jay, my question is the stillbirth, because being a former labor and delivery nurse, depending on when that stillbirth happens, it's not like a miscarriage. And my daughter had a stillborn at 30 weeks. And so the body really, it has to go through completely full labor. And so there's a lot more recovery time. And so a lot of companies allow for basically maternity leave for the 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, because the body still has to recover even though there's not a living child. And so just wondering if that should be built in to be respectful of that time. There's no way in my mind that anyone can be back to work in 5 days.
Yeah. Certainly open to amending the policy to take
But
that.
this isn't addressing that. This is just.
This is funeral leave.
This is a spouse or another relative. It's not the person under.
It's not the person, is it?
No, so this would be for employees, and I mean, so this is where the city is giving time to an employee who's experienced this. It doesn't necessarily prevent an employee from using additional vacation or other leave, and I don't know, I mean, Rob, I would assume an individual who experienced a stillbirth would qualify for FMLA?
Certainly.
And so our maternity leave policy would apply to that.
Okay, great, as long as that.
So this is just, yeah, it's not preventing them from using other leave, this is just the city giving people leave for unfortunate situations.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was covered.
But I think the reason is because it includes the miscarriage and stillbirth, so that question kind of, what we're saying is for stillbirth, 30 weeks, and then go into the maternity leave, that does not negate that. I think is what Sarah was playing.
It's just making sure that if someone does experience any of that, whatever other leave they may get, you get an additional few days of leave on top of that.
Great, great.
Okay,
That-
so
I just wanted to make sure.
I have a quick question. If, this is a horrible topic, but let's say that my wife is pregnant and 2 weeks after we learn the pregnancy, so it's very early on, would that count as a miscarriage? Because I'll admit in public that we had that after a month and it really hit me hard. So
the city
I can still feel it was a long time ago.
I think the city says, you come and say this has happened, the city is not going to be delving in, please give us your details on how this happened. It's going to be, please take the time off.
Yeah, they want to go find
So
things.
most likely not, or not, what we've heard happen is when there's a miscarriage, a lot of people, it's very private. And so they might not want to take this for the privacy. Does that make sense? So, but this gives it, I guess, it's there, they notify the supervisor or the city administrator. And that is now, when you bring up something for, they want to be sensitive that, while they're gone, we need to be careful, because there's probably some, what would be our criteria to make sure if that happened, that it's not widely known?
At a minimum, HR would need to know to apply that appropriate leave, essentially.
We got sensitive.
Is there a motion?
There is not a motion yet, but that is,
I'll make the motion.
Can I say one thing first? I just appreciate staff putting this together so quickly after we brought it up, and I think it is long overdue, and I'm glad to see it, so thank you.
Want to make a motion?
I move that the Highland City Council adopt the Highland City Resolution amending portions of the Highland City personnel policy related to the requirements of Utah Code 10-3-1103.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Tim, second by Scott, ready to vote?
I have to do verbal.
Okay, go ahead, verbal.
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Opposed to Brittany?
Yep.
Scott?
Yes, I voted.
It's faster than way. Okay, we are now down to, next item is going to be staff shoes. You've got several items that read 10A all the way through H. Is there something you're going, hey, I understand, I'm sorry, we have some time constraints here, but is there some things that we need to definitely go through?
10A and B has to do with the budget you're going to approve next week, so we would like those done, and E, and F and G are both very quick.
Okay, that is yours.
So we'll skip Tyler, are you okay if we skip progress for tonight and do that next time? Sure. Okay, so we'll skip progress and water management plan.
All right, that sounds like a go for me on today. Just as a heads up for items that will be presented formally in 2 weeks, but wanted to make sure you have an opportunity to digest and ask any questions in the interim. So with regard to some things that, only a few changes from the budget that you saw beginning of May. And one of those involves sales tax. Basically, in a nutshell, the State League of Cities and Towns commissioned a study that focused on 63 cities, not including Highland, but obviously would represent some of the trends that we're seeing as well. They're forecasting sales tax to be down this year from years prior. That's not going to come as a shock to anybody. And then next year, actually, a decrease in sales tax slightly. In a nutshell, we are seeing some slowing here in the city. The first through the first 9 months of this fiscal year, the sales tax revenue that applies, about 2.9 million. The first 5 months were gangbusters like last year. Then we've seen in the last 4 months a slowdown. If we were to finish the year, the next few months at the same 2.3% we've averaged over the last 4 months, we'd still fare better than the estimate that this study had advocated for. So we're likely to see between 3.8 and 3.9 by the end of this fiscal year. We won't talk on that too much. This is just representing the typical economic give back every decade or so, but there's some kind of adjustment. So basically here for the budget next year, we had discussed at one point estimates as high as $4.3 million. The mayor's tentative budget included $4 million, and they're following discussions with the mayor, we're recommending adjusting that projection to 3.9. Any questions there on the sales tax?
Are you just taking a 12-month average, not rolling average, or is it weighted to seasonal spending trends?
So that 2.3% is seasonal.
Okay, because I'm sure December is we're going to get more money, or pre-Christmas we'll get more money than, let's say, March. So I just think it would be inaccurate to take a 12-month as opposed to seasonal adjustments.
Right. In honesty, the last 6 months of the fiscal year, there is a slight weighting towards those 6 months. So even after Christmas, we see a little bit more spending typically.
Thanks.
Can I just make a little comment?
Yeah.
So I think it's good the city staff always budgets conservatively. However, when we had COVID 3 years ago, there was a bully panic that sales tax was going to be, and we missed it by $500,000. The next year, we thought it was going to be not so great. We still made $300,000 more. So I tend to be an optimist. It's hard to predict what the economy is going to do and government policies and that. So I think it's good to be conservative, but it seems like as a whole, we keep getting a little bit more than we think we're going to get. So hopefully that trend will persist.
We can certainly adjust to that with mid-year adjustments and if those trends come through positively. I wanted to point out here, we did see benefit to the budget. Benefits, medical benefits, the renewal came in at 4% as opposed to the 10% that we were anticipating.
Jay.
Very good. Jay has some information on planning commission.
Yeah, so recently, council asked if we would look into planning commission compensation and where we line up with that. I went out to our neighbors here in the valley, those who responded. You can see what the compensation is per meeting. In Highland Falls, right in the middle, you have cities that provide them dinner, but in a pass to the rec center, but no financial compensation, all the way up to a couple of cities that do $100 per meeting. We're at 56, and if you take the average of all of those, the average is 62, so we fall pretty much directly in the middle. We can raise that amount. The philosophy among planning commissioners, I've never met a planning commissioner that does it for the money. Most of them have no idea that there is any sort of compensation. And so I don't know if the idea that we might get more people, better people, pans out if we pay them more. And so, we're happy to raise the amount if you feel like we need to.
I'm going to give my opinion if that's okay.
Do what?
No, we decided we don't want to.
Yeah, I think we should build them a rec center and provide them.
What's your opinion?
I'll tell you my opinion. The state legislature has now empowered planning commissions more on some of this development. And so they're going to have to deal, as they sometimes do, in a public hearing on some of these development issues. And I think they're going to have to spend more time and deal with more frustrated citizens. I personally would lean to paying them a little bit more because we need them to be present and to be involved because they're carrying a bigger role. Now, do I agree with what the state legislature did? Not necessarily, but they did. So I think we have to think about that.
I would be in favor of paying them a little bit more also. I think for maybe slightly different reasons than Scott, although I agree that that's important. I just think it's not cool to give ourselves a salary increase and give city staff a salary increase and then not give planning commission an increase at all. So that just doesn't seem cool.
I'm supportive as well.
So what type of dollar amount are you talking?
Like a percentage, I mean, minimal, right? But like if we're gonna include, I don't know if it's, I don't even know what ours ended up being, like a percentage wise, it was a few bucks, but.
They meet once a month.
Once a month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like it's that big of a hit to the budget,
And
right?
if you do an average $62, what's your average?
Yeah, I mean, that's $6 raise.
Is that more than 10%?
I mean, I think that's great to go 62, take it to average. I just think it's important to respect their position, I guess.
Yeah. I just think we need an active planning commission, and I know they do it as service, like we do a lot of this for service. I'd probably pay them 80.
I'm looking across the city, I'll be real, I think Lehigh Planning Commission might have to get together twice a month. Some of these, we're once a month, I wouldn't be surprised if Lehigh and Draper are twice a month, I don't know if Linden's twice a month.
Yeah, Draper and Linden are both twice a month.
It's actually per meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, per meeting.
Well, so they get 200 a month.
Yeah, so
And our meetings are long.
we have a long meeting.
What's the council recommend here? Give us an amount.
I threw out 80 for one meeting a month.
75, but I can go with Scott to 80.
If you take
76.
76.
If we remove the two low, which I think are way too low, it comes up to be about $80.
I like to run 80. The 80.
Okay, I think we got 80 in that back.
Does that have to go to the planning commission?
No, we had for, okay. Next item is the cemetery and garbage.
Great, so this is related to the fee schedule. As you're probably aware, the city is required to publish all rates and fees that would be charged in a comprehensive fee schedule. It's about 12 pages long. We'll present the full document for your review and approval next council meeting. But just a highlight of some of the changes, actually all of the changes that the staff has prepared there. Many of which you've already seen or discussed. So the park impact fee, as the council approved the increase, some adjustments to water meter fees. Those are just pass-along costs, so those are reflective of costs the city incurs. We're actually reducing some of the fees for PI. Cemetery, it's a straight 3% as per the spending plan, or excuse me, the funding plan, which it contemplates in the cemetery perpetual fund. Maintenance agreement application is a new fee of $25. Interlibrary loan, that's just a pass-through the cost the library incurs. Jail will talk more about the garbage recycling, no change anticipated there. And then open space fee is anticipated to be removed. Any questions on any of those before Jay jumps in on garbage?
So if we decide on a fee for the traffic calming, whatever, we can add that later once we approve that as a process, right?
Correct. The fee schedule can be amended at any time, but as a matter of simplicity and to be transparent, we as staff try to bring those to the council all at once as much as possible so that we're not inundating folks with revisions every other week that kind of thing. But
I'm going to have to go on garbage, that's good news.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, no change for the fee for garbage. In the original budget, we used just a placeholder amount of $900,000 for the waste management hauling fee. That amount needed for this next year will be closer to $850,000. That's what we're budgeting. And so because that amount is not as high as we anticipated, we will not need to raise the fees here.
Any other information? Okay, that is IAB. Now we need to go to E.
We're going to E, yes.
Active transportation plan.
For the active transportation plan, that's just a quick, it'll be coming to you here the next couple of days. We'll be emailing it to you. It's a somewhat lengthy document, so we wanted to give you plenty of time to review it before it's actually on the agenda in, remember what?
It was the 20th, or would have been a communication item on the 20th.
Yeah. So.
It's possible that schedule may revise, because we were thinking, okay, because, what did we talk about, was traffic toolbox, right, and active transportation, they're related, right, and they're both kind of beefy documents, and so we were thinking kind of put one to bed and then hit the other. So it might be possible that we extend those timelines a little bit, just because we want to make sure we get the toolbox right before we also ask you to review the active transportation plan, but it will be coming soon and it's lengthy, so please do review it in time.
Thank you. Flood update, Andy.
Good news is, looks promising that we've kind of faced the worst. Given our weather forecast and the way that the rivers and flows are going, we think that we've kind of crossed that peak and we're coming down. Right now, we're optimistic, say it that way. We make no guarantees because the weather forecast can change and can change, but with what's melted off thus far and where we're at, we feel like we've seen the worst for this year, hopefully, and we're feeling optimistic about that.
I want to say thanks for all you've done, and pass our thanks on to Ernie Johns, because I know he's worked really hard.
Yes.
What was the highest cubic feet per second we reached at the mouth of the canyon?
I think we got up to, we got up to approaching 850 CFS.
That's what I heard. So somehow we handled that, because he was worried when we met 3 weeks ago we'd have trouble at 750.
Yeah, it was. We were really worried as it was getting up there. We were watching very closely because we were very worried how we were going to handle things. And certainly, we can't say that everyone escaped scot-free. I mean, American Fork had a portion of the golf course culvert fail. I don't know if you all saw that, but a portion of the culvert that carries water to the golf course failed and it kind of floated and had to be removed. There's been roadways closed down near the boat harbor in American Forks. There has been impacts, adverse impacts, but through Highland, gratefully through the efforts of all that put efforts into preparing, and through a very good weather pattern, probably about as good as we could have hoped for. We were able to bring the snow back down, in a managed manner. Had we been a little bit hotter, our 850 could have been 1,000 very easily, and we could have faced a different circumstance. So, in that regard, we'll count ourselves very lucky and blessed to have had the conditions that we have.
And thank you for all of our staff. I mean, one of the things, some of you maybe saw a post on Highland Observer that our lawns were being taken care of. I mean, and I know there were some maintenance things, but we had a lot of staff out there that were rebasing, clearing things out. They were trying to staff things, and there was a lot of hours put in. We had a little bit of flooding down in the Hidden Oaks area. That whole neighborhood, they got to be patted back. They all came together and sandbagged down there one night to kind of help so the bank wasn't going to slip away there. And so I think and then all the residents came out and sandbagged. I think we've had good residents, so hopefully get through that. Okay, we'll go to the next items, Alpine Food Storage. They gave a whole update. I'll just read the last little paragraph. We are still targeting the middle of June as the date that we'll start doing business down in American Fork. Although it's likely to do a large, more comprehensive move over the last weekend of June. It was a long holiday possibility. So what they're saying is they're going to try to start opening down in the middle of June, but probably the major move will happen the very last weekend of June. Probably go a little bit in the 4th of July. Just remember our business permits expire on June 30th, and that's what we extended them to.
Done, June 30th.
So that's the update on Alpine Food Storage. I don't know if there's anything else. Just a couple. We have Old Public Safety next Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. We have a work session on the 20th at 6 p.m. Once again, the item we will discuss in the work session, Aaron.
It was supposed to be the active transportation plan.
Is that still your thought?
Either that or we might talk about the toolbox again. Bring that back. I'd like to talk to staff about that, but please plan on a 6 o'clock work session.
6 o'clock.
One thing I was going to bring up is we do have work scheduled for the 20th, and so it will be a little bit dependent on if we can reschedule them. So there may be some reason to just kind of keep them where they're scheduled to come and give us a presentation, but we can talk about that.
What was our actual presentation?
They're the ones who we contract to do the active transportation plan.
Okay. I just don't think it was engineering. Why we haven't been engineering? I get a paper.
Aaron, I think we do need to address Canal Boulevard as soon as we can. I don't feel comfortable putting that off.
The speed control, speed mitigation, I agree with that. So there's two of us. We'd like it to be on the agenda sooner than later.
Okay.
Then I'll make it 3.
Make it
So I will not be able to be there for that work session, but I will be there at 7 for that.
So you won't be there at 6, you'll be there at 7. Right. And we're now, as we look at July, I will have to be out on July 18th. Is there any other council members as you look in, will they be gone on July 18th?
No, but I will be gone for the public safety meeting on the 12th.
So who's the mayor coming in?
At this time, it's good.
That's what I thought.
Ice cream day again.
Yes.
Hey,
If there's nothing else, we do not have anything for a closed session, so we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a second? We have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Scott, seconded by Sarah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.